Chapter 4025. After everything was ready, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others gathered at the teleportation array. When they arrived, they saw that the teleportation array was already full of cultivators. At this moment, they were queuing up one after another to be teleported. Such a scene was truly rare to see. From the looks of it, I'm afraid that most of the disciples of the inner hall are here. We packed up fast enough, but I didn't expect that there would be so many people faster than us. Shangguan Yingying's eyes were full of amazement. They packed up as fast as they could, but they didn't expect others to be so fast. Such a rare opportunity. No one wants to miss it. It's normal for everyone to have such a reaction. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. There's only a total of 2 hours. If we are slow, maybe the teleportation will be over before it's his turn. That would be a tragedy. For such a big thing, who dares to waste a little time? It's safer to go early. When Xiren said with a smile. Run Ziheng nodded. That's true. When I came, I found that many cultivators were running. We couldn't help but speed up. When they were queuing up, most of the cultivators had already formed a team. They didn't dare to ignore the Hall Master's reminder. This trip was so dangerous that they had to act with a team to reduce the danger. Therefore, everyone was teleporting in a team with the best relationship they had on normal days. When Xiren and the others used to have a good relationship with other teams, but since Bailey Hongzhuang and the others came to the inner hall, they became a fixed team. After queuing for a while, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were successfully teleported to the training place. There were also many cultivators of the inner hall of Penglai near them. Almost immediately, everyone walked forward without hesitation. According to the direction that the Hall Master had mentioned before, this relic was in the center of the training place. They had to reach the center as soon as possible to see the relic with their own eyes. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others hurried without stopping. Although the restriction on the relic had not been lifted, no one knew when it would be lifted. Maybe it would be lifted in the blink of an eye. With so many competitors, it was naturally better to arrive as soon as possible. For a time, the group seemed to be competing in speed as they hurried forward. Such a scene had never appeared in the history of the Penglai Palace. The scope of the training ground was very wide. Even if everyone used their fastest speed, it was still not something that could be reached in a short while. At night, the skeleton army appeared. However, this was probably the most fearless time for the Penglai Palace disciples. Normally, a team would have at most 20 people. Facing a large army of skeletons, everyone could only be cautious. However, at that moment, over 100 people were moving together. Merely their auras were completely different. Without any hesitation, everyone took out their weapons and charged towards the skeleton army. Advanced courageously, fearless. The skeleton army obviously didn't expect to encounter such a situation. Under the joint attack of everyone, the speed at which the skeleton army was annihilated was astonishing. The eerie white bones turned into powder under their hands, completely disappearing from the world. Chapter 4026. Haha, we usually have to run and hide whenever we run into these fellows. Now, we can finally slaughter them. Let's show these disgusting fellows our power. We'll kill our way through. Charge! Everyone raised their weapons high as the energy within their bodies surged. Their aura was terrifying. Dazzling and colorful martial arts techniques exploded. They were as dazzling and brilliant as fireworks in the dark night. Even though the skeleton army had evolved, they were still unable to hold on in the face of everyone's crazy attacks. The speed at which they dispersed was very fast. The Lich was chanting with all his might. Bailey Hongzhuang held a 9-tailed zither in her hand, and the sound of the zither continued to pour out from her hands. The other cultivators in the group who were proficient in sound attacks also used all their skills to resist the Lich's chanting. In a short period of time, the skeleton army realized that the group's aura was simply too shocking. Immediately, they all entered the pit and disappeared from everyone's sight. When they saw the skeleton army fleeing, everyone could not help but smile brightly. Usually, the skeleton army was their nightmare. They never thought that they would be able to chase the skeleton army away. This feeling was extremely satisfying. Just as Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were hurriedly gathering at the center of the training grounds, the Hundred Flowers Order and the Crimson Moon Sect were not slow either. This was not only a competition for their personal benefits, but also for the benefit of their respective sections. After 2 hours, the three great organizations joined forces to seal off the entrance, preventing anyone from entering. Not only that, they had also sealed off the other entrance. Similarly, the people from the upper realm were not allowed to enter. This was because this was a benefit that they had fought for their own cultivators. After 3 days of hurrying, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others finally arrived at their destination. In their line of sight, the most eye-catching thing was a pitch-black building. In this pitch-black environment, it appeared exceptionally cold and majestic. It was unique and perfectly blended in together. The style of this ruin was completely different from what Bailey Hongzhuang and the others had seen before. Even though the other ruins were also very grand and magnificent, the lines of this building were filled with gentleness. However, the ruins in front of them gave off a cold and sharp feeling, causing them to not dare to approach it. In this dark world, it exuded a unique charm, mystery, coldness, and fatal attraction. Around the ruins, everyone also noticed the large group of skeletons. These skeletons seemed to be guarding the ruins. Liches and skeleton soldiers appeared in large numbers, not to mention the skeleton army. This scale was much more terrifying than the skeleton army that they had encountered in the past. Oh my God, there are so many skeletons gathered here. Isn't this a little too terrifying? Just passing through these skeletons and entering the ruins won't be an easy task. After hearing the temple master's words, I knew that these ruins would not be easy to explore. However, the scene before me is even more frightening and shocking than I had imagined. I finally understand why the experts in the palace stayed here for so long. Who knows how long it would take to kill all these skeletons. Chapter 4027. This scene is a little terrifying. A.O. Lingxiao couldn't help but say. Just looking at the black mass in front of them was enough to make one's scalp numb. Indeed, Shangguan Ying frowned and looked a little hesitant. There are so many skeletons. How are we going to deal with them? Bailey Hongzhuang pondered and said, I'm afraid it's impossible to deal with them. The only thing we can do is to pass through these skeletons and enter. This is because there are too many skeletons in the training ground. Even if we can kill these skeletons, new skeletons may join in at any time. In this way, there will be no end to it. Just taking turns is enough to grind all of us to death. Hongzhuang is right. Mo Yunjua nodded. We can only outsmart them. However, there are so many skeletons. It will be difficult for us to take advantage of them. Ren Zimei's face was a little ugly. Just looking at the situation in front of them, she felt that the possibility of success was too small. Although there are many skeletons, we have a lot of people. Once the cultivators of the three forces gather, the skeletons won't be able to stop everyone. So the possibility of us taking advantage of them is still very high. Di Beichun smiled faintly. That's right. We'll cross the bridge when we get there. We'll find a way when the time comes. Ren Ziheng agreed. Let's rest here for the time being. Judging from the situation of the restriction, it won't disappear for a while. Why don't we rest here and adjust ourselves to the best condition? Once the restriction disappears, we'll start moving. Bailey Hongzhuang suggested. Chu Jinfeng looked at the faint layer of black restriction in the distance and couldn't help but ask, why don't we try to break this restriction? It can't be broken. Di Beichun, Bailey Hongzhuang, and Mo Yunjua all answered at once. Hearing this, Chu Jinfeng was slightly stunned and asked why. If it could be broken, the experts of the three forces would have already done it when they came here. They wouldn't have waited until now. Di Beichun explained. I see. Chu Jinfeng finally understood. I'm really muddle-headed. I actually forgot about this. Just as everyone was discussing, they saw the figures of the Hundred Flowers Gate disciples in the distance. The Hundred Flowers Gate is quite fast as well. They arrived so quickly, Ren Zimei said. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at the Hundred Flowers Gates team and immediately realized that the Hundred Flowers Gates team was smaller than the Penglai Palaces. However, The 100 Flowers Gate's focus was on alchemy and medicine. Although they also cultivated, they couldn't compare to the Penglai Palace, which specialized in cultivation. At the same time, the cultivators from the Crimson Moon sect also appeared in another direction. The three major forces stood in three different directions, surrounding the black relic in the center. At this moment, everyone's eyes were focused on the center. However, no one dared to act rashly and alert the skeletons. The three parties were in a balance. Whoever provoked the skeletons first would be at a disadvantage. As a result, even though a large number of cultivators had gathered nearby, it was still extremely quiet. Everyone was waiting for an opportunity to strike. Bailey Hongzhuang closed her eyes and began to cultivate. According to her judgment, it would take quite some time for the restriction to disappear. Chapter 4028. Di Yujue immediately rushed to Penglai Palace. If it was an ordinary person, it would be extremely difficult to enter Penglai Palace. However, for Di Yujue, this was nothing at all. After he arrived at Penglai Palace, he only needed to report his name and walked into Penglai Palace unimpeded. After Long Yanwei and Izihua found out that Di Yujue had actually come to Penglai Palace, they could not help but be surprised. They knew very well that Di Yujue was a person from the upper realm and his status was extremely high. Although their status on Penglai Island was not bad, they were nothing in front of Di Yujue. Young Master Di, we are honored by your presence. Penglai Palace is truly honored. Long Yanwei bowed to Di Yujue, his expression filled with respect. The young and handsome man in front of him was an expert who was stronger than the palace master. In addition to his illustrious background, he was also extremely impressed. Seeing Long Yanwei and Izihua, Di Yujue's face also revealed a smile. So it's young Master Long and young Master Di. May I know why you have come to Penglai Palace today? Izihua could not help but ask. Penglai Palace was a very impressive place to others, but to someone like Di Yujue, it was not attractive at all. He was very clear about this point. However, Di Yujue had suddenly come here. There must be something. Otherwise, with how busy Di Yujue was, he would not have come here for a stroll out of boredom. Di Yujue cupped his hands. To be honest, I came to Penglai Palace today to look for someone. I hope that the two of you can help me guide the way. As Di Yujue's voice fell, Izihua and Long Yanwei could not help but look at each other. Both of their eyes flashed with intense surprise. With Di Yujue's status, he actually came to Penglai Palace personally to look for someone. They were really curious about what kind of person was worthy of Di Yujue personally coming to look for someone. Young Master Di, please speak. As long as it's someone from Penglai Palace, we will immediately find him. I wonder if Di Beichun is in Penglai Palace? Di Yujue asked. Hearing the name Di Beichun, they were even more surprised. They had not heard Di Beichun mention anything related to Di Yujue. Di Yujue had not mentioned anything about Di before. Why would he come to look for him today? Seeing Long Yanwei fall into silence, Di Yujue couldn't help but frown slightly. Is Di Beichun not a disciple of Penglai Palace? Only then did Izihua react. He quickly said, No, Di Beichun is our Penglai Palace's inner hall disciple. I wonder why young Master Di is looking for him. He's a child of my Di family. I came to look for him today to reunite with him. I hope the two of you can guide me. Di Yujue said calmly. Di Beichun was their Di family's young master. There was nothing to hide about this. As soon as these words came out, Izihua and Long Yujue could not help but be dumbfounded. Many possibilities flashed through their minds, but no one thought that it would be such a situation. Di Beichun was actually a member of the Di family. Even though both of them had the surname Di, neither of them thought that Di Beichun was from the Di family. Wasn't this a little too shocking? Di Beichun was actually from the upper realm? This was impossible. Chapter 4029. Izihua's face was also full of confusion. He had never heard of this before. If Di Beichun was a member of the Di family in the upper realm, then there was no need for him to join Penglai Palace at all. It was a complete waste of talent. Most importantly, with Di Beichun's identity, How could he not have a contract beast? Di Yujia looked at Long Yanwei and Izihua's surprised expressions and could not help but say, "He is a disciple of my D family who has been wandering outside. I just received news of him not long ago, so I came to find him. Where is he now? I hope you two can lead the way for me." Listening to Di Yujia, Izihua, and Long Yanwei finally understood. They could not help but think of the rumors they had heard before about the D family. Could it be Di Beichun was Di Yujua's son who was wandering outside? Looking at the extraordinarily handsome Di Yujia in front of them, and then thinking of the incomparably handsome Di Beichun, it was said that Di Yujua's wife was also a great beauty. Thinking about it this way, it was really possible. After all, there were still a few cultivators with such outstanding looks in the world. "Mr. D, this is really a bit unfortunate," Long Yanwei responded. "What do you mean?" Di Yujia was a little puzzled. Could it be that Di Beichun is no longer a disciple of your Penglai Palace? At this point, Di Yujua's voice suddenly became colder. If Penglai Palace dared to treat Di Beichun badly, he would not spare Penglai Palace. Seeing that Di Yujia misunderstood his meaning, Long Yanwei quickly explained, "Mr. D, things are not what you think. Di Beichun is a disciple of our Penglai Palace, but he just entered the training ground to participate in the training. I'm afraid he won't come out for a while." Hearing this, Di Yujia finally understood. "I see. Then I'll go find him." Others did not know about the training ground of Penglai Palace, but he knew very well. This training could be done any time, but the most important thing now was to meet each other. He already knew from Si Tuyin that Di Beichun had been looking forward to finding his biological parents. He believed that Di Beichun would be happy after knowing all this. After saying this, Di Yujia prepared to turn and leave. Seeing this, Izihua hurriedly stopped Di Yujia. "Mr. D, you can't enter the training ground now." Di Yujua's footsteps paused slightly, while a trace of bewilderment appeared between his brows. "What do you mean?" "The three major forces have made some discoveries in this training ground, so they decided to give this opportunity to the inner palace disciples of the three major forces. Therefore, after the inner palace disciples went to the training ground, the three major forces have already joined forces to seal this teleportation array. It will only be opened after this opportunity is obtained. Mr. D, since you've already found Di Beichun, I don't think you're in a hurry. Why don't you wait for a while?" Izihua looked at Di Yujia worriedly. If it was an ordinary person, it would be easy for them to stop him. However, facing Di Yujia, they did not have such confidence. If Di Yujia really wanted to barge in, then they really could not stop him. In this way, the alliance of the three major forces would be broken, and things would become much more complicated. "Mr. D, Di Beichun is an extremely outstanding inner palace disciple of our Penglai Palace. You only need to ask around a little to know that he is in the limelight in our Penglai Palace." Chapter 40-30. After all, young people also need to explore and search for their own opportunities. "What do you think, Master D?" Long Yanwei looked at Di Yujia. This was also an excellent opportunity for Di Beichun. If Di Beichun could obtain the inheritance, it would be very impressive. On the other hand, if Di Yujia decided to force his way in, it would be a huge problem that none of them could stop. Di Yujia frowned. "For the sake of a training exercise, you actually sealed the teleportation formation?" Hearing this, Long Yanwei and Izihua's expressions were somewhat awkward. This was also something that had never happened before in history. If it was any other day, it would naturally not be a problem. However, in front of Di Yujia, this matter was indeed. "It seems that you have made quite a discovery in the training grounds." The light in Di Yujua's eyes changed a little. He then nodded. "All right, since that's the case, I'll wait until it's over before returning." He believed that Long Yanwei and Izihua would not dare to lie to him. He only needed to go back and find out the ins and outs of this matter. However, just as Long Yanwei had said, cultivators had their own opportunities. Since Di Beichun had gone, it proved that he valued this opportunity very much. Therefore, as his father, he naturally could not stop him. He had waited for so many years. He did not mind waiting for a little longer. Only after Di Yujue had left did Long Yanwei and Izihua look at each other. Both of them could not help but breathe a sigh of relief. I never thought that Di Beichen was actually a member of the Di family. This is too surprising. Izihua could not help but sigh. For Di Yujue to personally come, I believe that Di Beichen's position in the Di family must be very high. Who knows? He might even be Di Yujue's son. Long Yanwei pondered and nodded. That is indeed a possibility. However, if that is really the case, then Di Beichen will be incredible in the future. Speaking of which, like father, like son, right? Izihua chuckled. Actually, even without the identity of the Di family, Di Beichen will not be an ordinary person in the future. Only Di Beichen and his group were able to leap from the 5th level of the Purple Realm to the 2nd level of the Astral Radiance Realm in such a short time. As an instructor of the Inner Palace, he had seen many outstanding cultivators. However, Di Beichen's group was the only one who could make such a leap within a year. Just the fact that they were able to obtain the inheritances of the Bloodground Abyss and the Demonic Abyss was enough to prove that their talent and potential were extremely shocking. That's true. Di Beichen, Bailey Hongzhuang, and Mo Yunjue are all rare cultivation geniuses. Their future achievements will probably exceed our imagination. However, with the identity of the Di family, Di Beichen was even more impressive. After all, the Di family itself is a very powerful existence. Long Yanwei's eyes were filled with emotion. In his heart, he was also happy for Di Beichen. No matter what, after wandering outside, he finally found out about his own family. This was always something to be happy about. When Di Yujue returned to the Golden Flame auction house, old Di had been waiting for him to return. However, when he saw that Di Yujue had returned alone with no one else beside him, his eyes could not help but flash with a strong sense of doubt. "Young master, why are you alone? Did the young master not come back? Is he not in the Penglai Palace?" Chapter 4031. Hearing Di Yujue's words, Elder Di finally relaxed. As long as nothing unexpected happened along the way, there wouldn't be any problems. Young master. The clansmen have been waiting for the return of the young master for many years. Why don't we go to the training grounds and find the young master? The earlier we send this news back to the clan, the happier the old master will be. Di Yujue shook his head. I had the same thought as well. However, there seems to be a good opportunity in this training. Since Beichen has gone, it proves that he also wants to obtain this opportunity. In the past, he was alone, and we never took care of him. Now that he wants to go out and explore, we naturally can't stop him. When he returns, it won't be too late to meet him. Although the Di family had a large family business, the Di family's disciples often went out to train. After all, even if the family could provide the disciples with cultivation resources, they couldn't completely rely on the family. If they always relied on the family, their improvement would always be limited. Only by going out to train could they obtain things that truly belonged to them. Di Beichen had been adventuring all these years. Although Elder Di didn't see it with his own eyes, the fact that the former could become a first-rate cultivation genius in the outside world was enough to prove his hard work. He didn't want to hinder Di Beichen's development, because this was his own destiny. Elder Di nodded. Young master, you're right. I was too anxious. Di Yujue smiled faintly. Beichen was able to turn the situation around. It can be seen that he's a blessed person. We don't have to worry too much. Under normal circumstances, the cursed physique was almost untreatable in the outside world. This was because this physique was simply too rare. Even if it appeared in the outside world, no one would know that it was because of the physique. However, under such circumstances, Di Beichen's wife was a godly doctor and even changed his physique. This kind of luck, no matter who it was, would probably sigh. The young master's fortune fills the heavens. Then let's wait for his return. A smile appeared on Di Lao's face. Although he did not see Di Beichen, he still put down the big stone in his heart. As long as they found it, it would be something worth celebrating. What happened next was only a matter of time. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others sat down to cultivate and wait after discovering the relics. They were very calm because they had encountered relics before and knew very well that these relics had very strong restrictions. Even though their current cultivation wasn't weak, the ruins in front of them couldn't be compared to those ruins in the past. Therefore, it was better to wait here quietly for the restriction to disappear. However, although they were aware of this, the other cultivators were not necessarily aware of this. After all, the frequency of the relic appearing was very low. Many cultivators had never seen a relic before and did not know anything about it. Under such circumstances, many cultivators were eager to make a move. With such a good opportunity in front of them, anyone would want to snatch it. As long as he entered earlier, he would have a higher chance of obtaining the inheritance. Immediately, some of the cultivators began to walk towards the ruins. Seeing this, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but frown and remind, "The restriction hasn't disappeared yet, so it's meaningless for you to go there." Chapter 4032. Junior Sister Bailey, it's useless for you to persuade them. They only want to obtain the inheritance and can't wait to enter the ruins. If you say that, they might think that you're a coward and want to drag them along. Ren Ziheng's expression revealed a hint of helplessness. He had stayed in the inner hall for such a long time, so he had a certain understanding of these matters. In the face of benefits, everyone was not as rational as they usually were. They only wanted to get the treasure as soon as possible. However, other than disturbing the skeletons and sending them to their deaths, there's no point in doing so. Shangguan Yingying frowned and looked a little speechless. That's their own choice, Mo Yunjue said faintly. This kind of thing depended on one's own choice. If they were lucky, they could enter the ruins directly. That would undoubtedly be an advantage. On the contrary, it was their choice to lose their lives. Let them do what they want. We just need to take care of ourselves. Di Beichen also nodded. However, if they continue to disturb the skeleton army might discover our existence. It's very disadvantageous for our Penglai Palace. Xiren's expression was solemn, and a trace of haze flashed in his eyes. Whether others died or not had nothing to do with him. However, if the skeletons were to be provoked because of this, it was not something he wanted to see. Don't worry, this kind of thing is definitely not only happening in our Penglai Palace's team. There must be many cultivators from the 100 Flowers Gate and the Crimson Moon sect who can't hold back. Di Beichen's expression was calm, and there was no trace of worry on his face. Sure enough, after the Penglai Palace's cultivators began to move, the disciples from the 100 Flowers Gate and the Crimson Moon sect in the other two directions were also eager to move. They all attacked the skeleton army. However, more cultivators chose to stay where they were and pay attention to the movements in front of them. As a group of cultivators approached the ruins from three directions, the skeletons that had been immersed in the light of the ruins noticed them and immediately attacked the cultivators who approached. Bang! 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 The fluctuations of the battle spread out in an instant. The cultivators from the three major forces and the skeleton army began to fight. As the battle became more and more intense, more and more cultivators from the three forces joined in. In a short period of time, a huge battlefield was formed. Both the skeletons and the cultivators were injured. Everyone wanted to pass through the army of skeletons and enter the ruins. The faint smell of blood permeated the air. Even though there were quite a number of cultivators from the three major forces, the number of skeletons was even greater. Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest of the 9 stood in their original positions without moving. Their gazes were fixed on the battlefield as a complicated light flickered in their eyes. It seems that my previous judgment was not wrong. These skeletons will continue to replenish themselves. Her ink-black phoenix-like eyes were filled with understanding. She had thought that such a situation would happen before, and now the cultivators of the three major forces had made her certain of it through the battle. Cultivators from the three major forces kept dying. Although the number of skeletons that disappeared was greater, they were quickly replenished. Chapter 4033. Based on the current situation, even if the barrier disappears, it'll be very difficult for us to get close to the ruins. Ren Ziheng's expression was rather solemn. Based on the skeleton's behavior, They would have to pass through the skeleton army if they wanted to enter the ruins. If they could not pass through, they could only watch helplessly as the ruins lay before them. It would be useless. Looks like this is the reason why the three great authorities have decided to give this opportunity to us. Bachin muttered to himself as his eyes rippled with a thoughtful light. The skeleton army's numbers are simply too great. If there are only a few of us, we won't be able to break through the skeleton army's defense. Hence, only cultivators from the three great authorities can join forces to have a chance. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded. Indeed, we'll still have a chance when everyone joins forces. After all, many people from each organization had come. If they joined forces, they would form a huge team. As long as they attacked together, they would be able to enter the ruins once they found a breakthrough. However, it was obviously impossible to destroy all the skeletons. The only thing they could do was to seize the opportunity and rush in. If they were too slow, once the number of cultivators dwindled, they would not be able to rush in. Many cultivators have already fallen. If this continues, the situation won't be too good. Renzime could not help but comment. It's only temporary. Mo Yunjue's expression was cold. Once they find out that they won't be able to pass through, everyone will stop sending themselves to their deaths. There will still be quite a number of cultivators left. Yunjue is right. It won't be long before they retreat. Bachin chimed in. Let's wait here patiently. At that moment, only a small number of cultivators had rushed forward. Most of the cultivators were very rational and did not attack immediately. After half an hour, a cultivator finally took the opportunity to approach the barrier. His face flickered with excitement. He finally had a chance to enter the ruins. Once he entered, he would be the first cultivator to enter the ruins. He would seize the opportunity. Many cultivators at the back looked envious. It was such a good opportunity. As long as they were one step faster, they would be one step closer to success. However, when the cultivator approached the restriction, he used his strongest power to attack the restriction. Unfortunately, the restriction did not react at all. That attack didn't even leave the slightest ripple on the restriction before it dissipated into nothingness. Seeing this, the cultivator couldn't help but be dumbfounded. This situation had completely exceeded his expectations. While the cultivator was still in a daze, the skeleton soldiers behind him immediately attacked and chopped off his head without giving him a chance to say anything. Following this scene, the cultivators at the back all sobered up a little. It turned out that merely passing through the army of skeletons was of no use because it was simply impossible to break through this layer of restriction. Some of the cultivators at the back immediately chose to retreat. After the first person retreated, the other cultivators also retreated one after another. Even if they passed through the army of skeletons, it would be useless. So why should they risk their lives at this moment? Chapter 4034. At that moment, the crowd stared at Bailey Hongzhuang and the others with a complicated look in their eyes. Even though most people were convinced by Bailey Hongzhuang, that was only in the area of Bailey Hongzhuang's medical skills. After all, she was still very young. Even though her cultivation has surpassed many people, no one believed that her experience would surpass theirs. Unfortunately, reality proved them that Bailey Hongzhuang's judgment was not wrong at all. They were wrong. The surroundings fell silent once again. After the cultivators had retreated, the skeleton army did not seem to have any intention of pursuing them. Instead, after the crowd had retreated from their area of influence, they stopped in their tracks and immersed themselves in the glory of the ruins as if they were on a pilgrimage. Looking at this situation, everyone felt uneasy in their hearts. Based on the skeleton army's behavior, they could tell that the ruins were a sacred place in their hearts. They wondered what the inheritance here would be like. Bailey Hongzhuang closed her eyes and began to circulate the heaven-defying technique in her body. She could faintly sense an inexplicable familiarity with the ruins in front of her. She found it hard to believe. This was the first time she had come into contact with the power of darkness ever since she had arrived at this training ground. It should have been extremely foreign to her. So, why did she feel an inexplicable sense of familiarity? This sense of familiarity was similar to the black stone she had received from the palace master. It had an inexplicable attraction. Could it be that black stone was also related to the power of darkness? Bailey Hongzhuang frowned. That's not right. If the black stone was filled with the power of darkness, based on the palace master and the others' understanding of the power of darkness, how could they not have figured it out after such a long time? Hongzhuang, what are you thinking about? You look like you have a lot on your mind. Shangguan Ying noticed the expression on Bailey Hongzhuang's face and could not help but ask with concern. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled and shook her head. It's nothing, I'm just thinking that these ruins aren't as simple as they seem. I've never seen such a strange ruin before. I wonder what I'll see after entering. Could it be that this place is also filled with skeletons? Chu Jinfeng couldn't help but sigh. After all, these skeletons were inanimate objects and didn't need to eat. They only needed to be nourished by the energy of darkness. Therefore, it wasn't impossible for the skeleton army to exist in these ruins. Rinzime couldn't help but shudder. She shrugged her shoulders and said, "It can't be that bad, right? Now that you mention it, I feel like this ruin is even more sinister. Everything is possible. Maybe the thing inside is even more terrifying than this skeleton army. No matter what, we have to be mentally prepared." Deep Baichen's eyes darkened. Bai Songming's warning was definitely not groundless. Not only were there various competitions, but the ruins were also filled with danger. Under such circumstances, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others waited outside for 3 days before they saw the restriction gradually fade. Every time the ruin appeared from underground, it meant that the restriction was gradually fading away. However, it would still remain for a period of time after it emerged from the ground until the restriction was completely gone. The color of the restriction became more and more turbulent, and there were even faint ripples. When the cultivators from the 3 great organizations saw this, they couldn't help but feel elated. Chapter 4035. Bailey Hongzhuang's ink-black phoenix eyes stared at the faint restrictive spell. She used her mental strength to sense the strength of the restrictive spell and made a judgment. "So, we're going to break into the ruins at night?" Shangguan Yingying's beautiful eyes flickered with astonishment. At night, the skeleton army's strength is at its strongest. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded and said with certainty, "This might be the intention of the original owner of the ruins. The power of darkness belongs to darkness, so it's naturally different from other ruins." Rin Ziheng, Chu Jinfeng, and Rinzime all looked at Bailey Hongzhuang in amazement. They didn't expect Bailey Hongzhuang to know so much about the ruins at such a young age. In comparison, although they had heard of the ruins, they had never seen it. So, all of their judgments about the ruins were still stuck in the books. After all, the ruins were treasures that could only be found by chance. It wasn't something that anyone would have the chance to encounter. Then we have to be prepared. We can move at any time. We have to pay close attention. A.O. Lingxiao said in a deep voice. This was an opportunity that was hard to come by. They had to give it their all. Night slowly fell. The restrictive spell of the ruins became fainter and fainter. It could disappear at any time. The group of skeletons still maintained their previous state as if they didn't feel the difference in the restrictive spell. This time, no one acted recklessly. After suffering the loss last time, no one wanted to do it again. After all, they were surrounded by skeletons. If they couldn't break into the restrictive spell at the first moment, it would be very uncomfortable to stay in the encirclement. Finally, under everyone's waiting, the restrictive spell completely disappeared. The moment the restrictive spell disappeared, the atmosphere seemed to freeze for a moment. Then, everyone started to charge at the fastest speed possible. Seeing this, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others didn't delay and rushed towards the ruins. They knew very well that they had the highest chance of breaking through when there were more people. Once they fell behind, it would be very difficult to break through the endless skeleton army. Origin energy surged in all the cultivators' bodies at the same time. The energy in the air was attracted by such a huge force and became chaotic. With so many people using martial skills at the same time, it was truly an extremely terrifying scene. When the skeleton army saw the cultivators of the three major forces charging forward, they immediately began to meet the enemy. It was obvious that they were guarding the ruins to the death, not allowing anyone to enter. A great battle broke out in an instant. The practitioners and the skeletons intertwined with each other and dispersed the ink-like darkness. Countless martial techniques were unleashed one after another. With blinding light and unparalleled power, they swept across the entire area. The skeleton army was annihilated at an extremely fast speed, but it was replenished at an even faster speed. The skeleton soldiers organized the skeleton army. Even though they no longer had any signs of life, this martial technique was still filled with tyrannical power when used by them. This was a battle between humans and skeletons, and it was a battle that erupted in an instant. A cool breeze blew by, carrying with it a faint smell of blood and killing intent. Everyone was doing their best to advance. At this moment, all the cultivators only had one goal, and that was to destroy the obstacles in front of them and enter the ruins. Chapter 4036. We have to maintain our formation. We can't be separated. Bachin reminded everyone, we don't know what we'll encounter after entering the ruins. It's safest to enter as a group. Everyone nodded. Although they had yet to enter the ruins, they could already foresee the risks. Every time they pursued the inheritance, they would encounter various tests. Once they failed the test, it was very likely that they would be injured or even die. However, wealth came from danger. Since they wanted to obtain the inheritance, they had to fight for it. Under such circumstances, the only thing they could do was to move as a group. At least that would increase their safety. The strength of these skeletons is a little abnormal. They're much stronger than the skeletons we've encountered before. Even the combat power of ordinary skeletons can't be underestimated. Rinzume's face was a little ugly. After exchanging blows with the skeletons, she felt a strong pressure. Even with her strength, it was very difficult to deal with it. These skeletons have evolved under the nourishment of the power of the ruins. Their combat power has greatly increased. They can't be compared to before, so everyone must be careful. Bailey Hongzhuang's expression was a little solemn. The skeleton army had evolved because of the ruins. The skeleton army had stayed here for such a long time, so it was expected that they would have such an evolution. However, this also made it very difficult for them to approach the ruins. It was definitely not easy to get close. Beichun, Imo, Yunjue, and Bailey Hongzhuang were the strongest cultivators in the team. Therefore, the three of them walked at the front and constantly used their powerful martial skills to open up the path for everyone. Xiren and the others followed closely behind. However, they did not dare to be negligent. They also attacked wave after wave, maintaining their vigilance and safety. It was a completely chaotic battle. There were cultivators and skeletons everywhere. They even had to be extra careful when fighting because the slightest carelessness could cause them to accidentally injure other cultivators. After all, at their level of cultivation, the destructive power of a single martial skill would be enormous, and the area of effect would be similarly vast. The two sides continued to exchange blows. The stronger cultivators could be said to be attacking all the way, while the weaker cultivators tried to follow behind these strong cultivators and take advantage of the moment when everyone was not paying attention to them to sneak in. All of a sudden, it could be said that everyone displayed their skills. As long as it was effective, they used all of them. Boom! Boom! Earth-shaking shockwaves continued to spread out, and the entire ground seemed to begin to tremble. The ground cracked inch by inch, and spiderweb-like cracks appeared. Such a scene was truly shocking. Bailey Hongzhuang's group continued to move forward. There were many skeletons in the army, so their speed was not considered slow. However, when they were halfway there, a team suddenly blocked their path. Seeing this, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others frowned. They could tell from the other party's robes that he was a member of the Crimson Moon sect. However, they clearly did not recognize him. Then, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others wanted to go around them and continue moving forward. However, The other party blocked their path once again. Instantly, Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but narrow her eyes and stare at the other party in an unfriendly manner. "What are you doing?" Chapter 4037. I heard that. You've killed Li Yunyu? The leader of the group glared at Bailey Hongzhuang and the others with an unfriendly look on his face. His voice was filled with menace and coldness. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others, who were initially confused, immediately understood what was going on when they heard the man's words. They were here for Li Yunyu. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichun looked at each other. If this had been any other day, they would have admitted to it directly. However, at a time like this, they could tell that the other party was a troublesome person. If they admitted to it, they might end up having to fight here. At a time like this, they really did not have the luxury of time to do so. With just one look, they had reached a tacit understanding. "I don't know what you're talking about," Di Beichun replied calmly. "If there's nothing else, we still need to enter the ruins. Don't block the way." Just as he had spoken, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others continued to move forward. They did not intend to have any further interactions with the other party. Just then, one of the cultivators in the group spoke up. "Senior Brother Li, I saw it with my own eyes. They were the ones who had killed Li Yunyu. I'm not mistaken." The cultivator's eyes were fixed on Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. Previously, he had happened to pass by and had witnessed Li Yunyu's entire group being destroyed by their hands. He had initially wanted to help, but the other party was simply too powerful. Hence, he had chosen to leave. Once he had returned, he had told Li Boyo about this. Ever since then, Li Boyo had come to the training grounds to look for Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. However, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others had never appeared. Until this time, when the ruins appeared, they finally encountered it. However, he never thought that Bailey Hongzhuang and the others would refuse to admit to it. Li Boyo was a well-known figure in the Crimson Moon sect. Usually, he would not be able to come into contact with them at all. It was only after he had told Li Boyo about Li Yunyu's murder that Li Boyo had allowed him to enter the circle. If Li Boyo believed that he was lying, he would not be able to stay in the Crimson Moon sect any longer. Thinking of this, his heart felt extremely gloomy. The other party had been able to kill Li Yunyu and the others. No matter how one looked at it, they were true experts. They were clearly experts, but they refused to admit it at a time like this. What were they thinking? What? You don't dare to admit it? Li Boyo looked at Di Beichun coldly. "I have people here who said that they saw you kill Li Yunyu. It's true that there's a lot of trouble when you're popular. Are you here to pick a fight?" Shangguan Yingying took a step forward, her face cold. "He said he saw it, so he saw it. If we say that we didn't kill him, why don't you believe us? Let me tell you, Hongzhuang is famous now. Many people want to get close to her, but there are also many people who want to cause trouble for her." We? Hearing Shangguan Yingying's words, Li Boyo and the others could not help but feel shocked. Initially, he had not believed Shangguan Yingying's words. However, Shangguan Yingying had suddenly said so much. He suddenly felt that Shangguan Yingying was not the type to lie. Could it be that he had made a mistake? Chapter 4038. Not to mention Li Boyo, even Ren Ziheng and the rest were stunned by Shangguan Yingying's words. If they had not been involved in this matter, and clearly knew that Li Yunyu had died in their hands, they would have thought that this had nothing to do with them after hearing Shangguan Yingying's words. Master, Yingying is becoming more and more powerful. Her ability to lie, without thinking, is almost on par with Xiren. Xiaohei's eyes were filled with surprise and admiration. In the past, she had thought that Yingying was a little impulsive. Now, Yingying was becoming more and more intelligent. It's all thanks to Xiren's good teachings. Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but laugh. In a short period of time, Shangguan Yingying's improvement was really shocking. Her words were enough to confuse the other party. While the other party was still confused, Di Beichun immediately threw out a sentence. "If you want to cause trouble for us, we welcome you. However, we have urgent matters to attend to now, and we don't have the time." After speaking, Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest immediately left. "Senior Brother Li, I really didn't lie to you. I saw them kill Li Yunyu with my own eyes. However, I didn't expect them to lie. Cheng Jianqing was so depressed that he was about to die. He had clearly told the truth, but, judging from the situation, it was obvious that no one believed him. Li Buoyou fell into silence and did not answer immediately. Instead, he said, "Forget it, we'll talk about this later. Let's enter the ruins first." After saying this, the cultivators behind him nodded. At this time, entering the ruins was the most important thing. Cheng Jianqing followed behind Li Buoyou, but his heart had quietly sunk. If Li Buoyou did not believe him, he would not be able to stay in the Crimson Moon sect in the future. This was not a situation that he wanted to see. If he had known earlier, he would not have told Li Buoyou about this. At least he would have been able to stay in the Crimson Moon sect peacefully. "Ying, you're becoming more and more intelligent," Bailey Hongzhuang praised. Hearing this, the smile on Shangwan Ying's face widened. I had a sudden inspiration. Fortunately, the effect is not bad. Hee. Senior brother Run, do you know who this person is? Di Beichen looked at Ren Ziheng. He did not know much about the cultivators of the Crimson Moon sect. Clearly, Ren Ziheng knew more about them than they did. Ren Ziheng nodded. This person is Li Yunyu's older brother, named Li Buoyou. The reason why Li Yunyu could have such a status and reputation in the Crimson Moon sect was because of his brother, Li Buoyou. Li Buoyou was a true expert of the Crimson Moon sect. He was powerful and righteous. Hence, he had a resounding reputation in the Crimson Moon sect. There were many cultivators who followed him. I thought that no one would know that we killed Li Yunyu, so I didn't take it to heart. But I didn't expect that someone would see this scene. This matter has become much more complicated. Is this Li Buoyou very strong? Mo Yunjue's eyes were deep, his voice cold. That's right. It said that his cultivation has already surpassed the 5th level of the Astral Radiance realm. It can be said that he's extremely powerful. Normally, no one is willing to offend him. Chapter 4039. Listening to Ren Ziheng's introduction to Li Buoyou, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others' hearts sank a little. Star Radiance Stage 5, this kind of strength was indeed extremely tyrannical. Even in Penglai Palace, cultivators with this kind of strength were first-class powerhouses. Most importantly, when Li Buoyou and the others came over just now, they had already noticed that the size of the other party's team was really not ordinary. If Li Buoyou found trouble with them now, then it would really cause them a lot of trouble. Then we'd better enter the ruins as soon as possible. It's best to get rid of Li Buoyou as soon as possible. Otherwise, with this guy here, we really have no fate with the ruins. When Xiren couldn't help but say, with such a great opportunity in front of them, they couldn't miss it just like that. Even if they really couldn't avoid it in the future, they would have to solve it in the future. At this time, they couldn't afford any delay. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded lightly. Li Buoyou is also very confused now. For a while, he still can't judge whether what we said is true or false, so we still have a chance. But once he comes back to his senses, I'm afraid it won't be so simple. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two quietly looked at each other. They didn't have any wishful thinking in their hearts. The mentality of a powerhouse was that they would rather kill by mistake than let go. Since that was the case, as long as there was a slight possibility, the other party would kill them to avenge Li Yunyu. This didn't affect everyone's speed. Under the charge of a group of cultivators, they quickly passed through the obstruction of the skeleton army and continued to approach the ruins. Li Buoyou's strength was extremely tyrannical. In addition to the size of his team, when the combat power fully erupted, it could be said that they were the fastest team. Seeing this, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others also pulled away from them as they moved forward. Bang, bang, bang. Under the collision of countless energy, Li Buoyou and the others were the first to approach the ruins. The restriction had long disappeared, so they walked directly to the entrance of the ruins without any obstruction. Noticing this scene, a touch of envy suddenly appeared in the eyes of the cultivators who were still fighting. The other party had already seized the opportunity, and the chances of obtaining the treasure would be higher. Li Buoyou and the others stood in front of the door and were somewhat hesitant. After all, no one knew what kind of situation they would encounter after opening this door. Finally, they pushed open the black door. Rumble. The heavy sound of the door opening rang out. Li Boyo and the others all retreated a distance, guarding against any possible attacks that might appear in the ruins. However, after the door opened, there was no movement at all. Seeing this, Li Boyo and the others couldn't help but look at each other before walking inside together. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were not slow either. Not long after Li Boyo and the others entered, they also entered the ruins. With the other party leading the way, they naturally didn't have to worry about any traps near the door. They immediately walked in. Darkness. It was still boundless darkness. Not only was the exterior of the building black, even the interior was black. The black bricks and the black totem emitted a demonic darkness and mystery. Seeing this scene, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others also had a trace of seriousness and nervousness on their faces. Chapter 4040. Damn, isn't this building a little too strange? I can feel the hairs on my body standing on end. Chu Jinfeng rubbed his hands together and shook his body. As soon as he walked in, he felt a cold breeze blow past him. It felt as if he had walked into a haunted house. Hearing Chu Jinfeng's words, the others could not help but shrink their necks. In fact, their feelings were exactly the same as Chu Jinfeng's. This ruin is strange indeed. The ruins that we've seen in the past were all very bright. It's nothing like this ruin. It's pitch black and makes one's heart flutter. Xiaohei could not help but mutter. This eerie feeling really made one's scalp go numb. The power of darkness itself is black. If it were a bright ruin, it would be unbelievable. Bailey Hongzhuang slowly spoke up as her eyes scanned her surroundings vigilantly. Ever since she found out that this ruin was related to the power of darkness, she felt that this ruin should not be underestimated. Now that she had entered, her feeling became even more profound. Therefore, she paid attention to every step she took to prevent herself from falling into a trap. Di Beichun took out a luminous pearl and illuminated the path in front of everyone. After taking a look, everyone realized that there was a path with no end in front of them. It was deep and pitch black, as if there was no end to it. Wow, this path is so long. It's really eerie. Xiren could not help but sigh. When one was walking in the darker it was, the longer the path felt. I remember that we entered the ruin not much later than Li Boyo and the others. Why haven't we seen any traces of them? Ren Zimei looked in front of her. The path was pitch black, and they could not hear any sound at all. It was really strange. As soon as she said that, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others could not help but look at each other. Their expressions became complicated. Indeed, according to what we've seen, this path is very long. The other party did not enter this path much earlier than us either. We should have been able to hear their movements. However, ever since we entered, it seems that only our voices could be heard. Regardless of whether it's the front or the back, we couldn't hear anything at all. This is rather strange. Mo Yunjue's deep and enchanting eyes flashed with the light of contemplation. The situation in front of him was indeed not right. Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but stop in her tracks. If Li Boyo and the others moved very quickly and left us far behind in a short period of time, that is not impossible. However, this matter is indeed a little strange. Why don't we wait here for a while and see if there will be any cultivators behind us? This is the only way to judge this matter now. Di Beichen nodded. Let's wait for a while. After making this decision, Ren Ziheng and the others did not object. They just stayed where they were. However, after waiting for a while, they still did not hear the slightest movement. Everyone understood. Looks like we're the only ones here. Bailey Hongzhuang's voice was firm. Logically speaking, the cultivators should be entering the ruins one after another. It was impossible for them to not hear anything after waiting for a while. Chapter 4041. What do you mean? Ren Zimei looked at Bailey Hongzhuang and the others in confusion. Seeing that they had a tacit understanding, she was confused. Are you saying that we're the only ones here? That's impossible. Everyone had entered the ruins, so how could they be the only ones here? Looking at Ren Zimei's confused look, Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but smile. Senior Sister Ren, we should have entered the small world set up by the owner of the ruins. There are actually many cultivators around us, but we can't see them. I see. Only then did Run Zime understand. She suddenly felt a little embarrassed. She was clearly the senior sister, but she knew less than her junior sister. Junior Sister Bailey, you know a lot of things. I'm really ashamed. Senior Sister Ren, don't belittle yourself. We just happen to know because we've seen it before. What should we do now? Ren Ziheng's eyes darkened. He did not have much experience in ruins. Now that he knew the situation, what should they do next? We have to find a way out of here. Di Beichan said in a deep voice. Bailey Hongzhuang looked around and knocked on the ground and walls around them. She did not find anything special and could not help but say, "There's nothing around here. Why don't we continue to move forward and see if we can find anything?" Okay, because they had discovered this very early, they did not have to move forward for long. Therefore, they could only continue to move forward and see if they could find anything. After making this decision, everyone continued to move forward. However, they did not move as quickly as before. They only paid attention to the situation around them as they walked. However, after walking for a long time, they did not find anything. Everyone could not help but frown. At the same time, Li Boyo and the others who had entered the ruins were in the same situation. They were confused by the scene in front of them and could not find a breakthrough at all. Why is it like this? Li Boyo stopped in his tracks. Based on what they had seen before, the ruins were indeed huge. However, they had been walking for so long that they had long exceeded the range of what they could see. Senior Brother Li, something is wrong with the situation. The cultivator behind him also said, "Let's stop and think about it. This situation is a little different from what we thought." Bailey Hongzhuang and the others slowed down and carefully observed their surroundings. This situation is really strange. It seems that there's no use for us to continue walking. Mo Yunjua said, "Let's stop and think about the situation around us. There must be some places that we have not found." Di Beichan looked at everyone and suggested. Everyone nodded. They had been walking for so long, and they had not found anything. By now, there was no point to continue walking. Since that was the case, it was better to think about where the problem was. Otherwise, it would be useless to just waste his energy. For a time, everyone stopped where they were and looked at the walls around them. However, the walls were all paved with black bricks, and he couldn't see any difference at all. Chapter 4042. However, no matter how hard Bailey Hongzhuang knocked on the surrounding bricks, she did not notice any difference. This place is so strange. We've been searching for so long, but why haven't we found anything? Shangwan Yingying looked puzzled. She had always heard that there were various unexpected situations in the ruins, but there should be traces to follow. The situation in front of them was completely baffling, and they did not know where to start. It's indeed a little strange. Zyra nodded. There's nothing here except for the walls. Moreover, there's nothing special about the walls. Where are we going to find a way to crack it? This is my first time entering the ruins, so I can't give any good suggestions. Ren Ziheng frowned. If Bailey Hongzhuang and the others had not discovered that this was a small world, he did not know how long it would have taken him to figure it out. He was completely baffled by the current situation and had absolutely no idea what to do. Everyone, please calm down. Since the owner of the ruins has set up all of this, there must be a way to crack it. If you want to obtain the treasures in the ruins, you must pay a price. Let's search carefully. Maybe we'll miss some details. Di Beichan calmed everyone's emotions. The more confused they were, the easier it was for them to become anxious. Once they became anxious, it would be even more difficult to find anything. Therefore, they must first suppress this negative emotion. Only by calming down would they be able to find something. Hearing Di Beichan's words, Ren Ziheng and the others nodded. The anxiety in their eyes quietly dissipated. Everyone began to check their surroundings patiently. Bailey Hongzhuang felt the wall in front of her with both hands. There were only these things here. Presumably, they would have to start from this wall. After carefully feeling around, Bailey Hongzhuang suddenly said, Bei-chun, there seems to be a small sunken spot on this wall. Following Bailey Hongzhuang's words, everyone could not help but come closer. They looked curiously at the spot that Bailey Hongzhuang was pointing at. After taking a closer look, everyone's faces were full of surprise. Indeed, there's a sunken spot here. The sunken spot was very small. If they did not reach out to feel it carefully, it was very likely that they would have missed it. But this spot is not a mechanism. What does a sunken spot mean? Ao Lingxiao's eyes were full of thoughts. Although there was a trace of discovery, what was the use of it? At this moment, Shangguan Yingying's voice rang out. I found a spot here too. Yes, there's one here too. Rinzime followed. After discovering these small dots one after another, everyone ruled out the possibility that they were accidental. Even if the stone was slightly damaged, it was impossible for several small dots to appear in one area. It was very likely that the key lay in these small dots. The next moment, Imo Yunjue took out some fluorescent powder from his chinquan bag and sprinkled it on the small dot. The small became bright in the darkness. Let's find these dots and see if they can give us any hints, Imo Yunjue said. Chapter 4043. Small dots were discovered one after another, and everyone used fluorescent powder to mark these small dots. In the end, everyone realized that the number of dots was not small. It was not until the last dot was marked out that they realized that the glowing dots were like fireflies all around them. There are no more dots. We found all of them, Bailey Hongzhuang said slowly. Shangguan Yingying immediately sat on the ground and looked at the dots on the three walls. Her eyes were filled with amazement. Hongzhuang, you're really amazing. You're so careful that you can even find these dots. If it were me, I'm afraid that I would only think that these are traces left behind by the erosion of time. Rinzime nodded repeatedly. Yes, who would have thought that these dots would be the key to solving the mystery? Ordinary people would overlook them. Fortunately, I came with you. Otherwise, I'm afraid that I would have to stay in this dark path forever and never be able to get out. I just have some experience and know that I can't overlook anything. That's why I was able to find them. Bailey Hongzhuang looked indifferent. After exploring the ruins several times, she already understood that many details that people usually overlook were often the key to solving the mystery. Perhaps every owner of the ruins would have this idea, so her observation was especially meticulous. However, these dots looked disorderly. I don't know what they mean. Bailey Hongzhuang raised her head and looked at the flickering dots around her. Her pretty face was filled with confusion. These disorderly dots could not give them any hints at all. If she was not sure that there were so many dots around her, she would not even think that these were hints at all. Observe carefully. Maybe there is some pattern in these dots that we haven't found yet. Di Bei-chun held Bailey Hongzhuang's little hand. It's already very amazing that you can find the existence of these dots. Hearing Di Bei-chun's gentle and doting words, Bailey Hongzhuang's heart warmed and the corners of her lips could not help but curl up slightly. As long as Di Bei-chun was by her side, she would feel extremely at ease. Next, everyone began to stare at these dots. However, the existence of these dots was too messy, and they couldn't make any connections at all. I only feel countless fireflies flying around in front of me. They're making me dizzy. Chu Jinfeng could not help but rub his head with both hands. He felt that his brain was a mess, and he could not understand the meaning of these things. Who knows what these things are for? I don't understand at all. Rinzime also looked frustrated. This kind of thing was too brain-draining. She thought of everything she could think of, but she still couldn't find anything. Shangguan Yingying couldn't help but look at Wenziren. Seeing that Wenziren and the others were still staring at these dots with serious expressions, she dismissed the idea of speaking. If it were them, they would not be able to find any clues. Time gradually passed. In this silent darkness, no one knew how much time had passed. But according to their judgment, it was probably 3 days. Chapter 4044. Master, have you discovered anything? Xiao Hei rubbed her stiff neck. Her round little face was filled with confusion and helplessness. I've been looking at it for so long that my neck is sore, but I haven't discovered anything special. Bailey Hongzhuang frowned slightly. Her bright, moon-like eyes were also filled with confusion and bewilderment. The arrangement of these little dots is just too strange. No matter how I look at it, I can't connect them together. Even the 8 diagrams don't seem to have such an arrangement. On the contrary, I feel that it looks like we're looking at a sky full of stars. These little dots are just like the arrangement of the stars. They're very random and untraceable. In the past 3 days, she had thought of everything that she could think of. However, the results still made her feel extremely helpless. "Wife, what did you just say?" Di Beichen suddenly turned to look at Bailey Hongzhuang. His dark and deep eyes were shining brightly. Bailey Hongzhuang was slightly stunned. "I said that these arrangements are untraceable." "That's not right." Di Beichen shook his head. His expression was full of seriousness. There's another sentence before that. "These little dots are just like the arrangement of the stars. They're untraceable." Bailey Hongzhuang thought about what she had said before. It seemed to be this sentence. Di Beichen's eyes lit up. He clasped his hands together, and his voice was filled with surprise. "That's right. That's the sentence? What does that mean?" Shang Waningying could not help but look at Di Beichen. In fact, she felt the same as Hongzhuang. They both felt as if they were looking at the stars. However, what was the problem? "I vaguely feel that we've imagined the arrangement of these little dots to be too complicated. Perhaps these little dots were not arranged according to any special pattern at all. They were just casually arranged by the owner of the ruins. Stars. Perhaps this is the sky full of stars." After saying this, Di Beichen seemed to have opened up a new train of thought. His deep and bright eyes once again looked at the stars and fell into deep thought. Looking at this scene, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others couldn't help but look at each other. Looking at the situation, it was obvious that Di Beichen already had an idea. Perhaps Beichen is right. We've been trying to figure out what kind of pattern these little dots follow. Perhaps these little dots don't have any pattern at all, and were just randomly created by the owner of the ruins. Perhaps if we think about it in another direction, we'll gain something unexpected, Mo Yunjua pondered and said. In fact, he had also been observing for 3 whole days without finding anything. Bailey Hongzhuang nodded. Right now, she really couldn't find any pattern. Vaguely, she also felt that Di Beichen's judgment was right. Most importantly, she saw confidence on Di Beichen's face. Every time Di Beichen revealed such an expression, it meant that he had found something. She believed that Di Beichen would definitely find a way to solve this problem. Everyone only saw that Di Beichen had been staring at the starry sky. There was no longer a blank look on his face. On the contrary, there was a hint of confidence in his heart. Ren Ziheng and the others looked at each other. They had not found anything so far. Even after listening to the conversation between Bailey Hongzhuang and the others, they still could not figure out where the breakthrough was. Chapter 40-45. Di Beichen and the others looked as if they had been enlightened, but they had been confused ever since they came in. They were clearly senior brothers, but it was Di Beichen and the others who had been leading the way. On the contrary, they seemed to have not discovered anything since they came here. This was too frustrating. Normally, Rinzame would never admit it if others said this to her. However, after seeing this scene, she had no choice but to admit it. No wonder Di Beichen and the others could improve their cultivation so quickly. This level of understanding was much stronger than theirs. Fortunately, we came in with junior brother Di and the others. Otherwise, just thinking about it would be enough for us to bear. Chu Jinfeng shrugged. In the past, he had always hoped to have the opportunity to explore the ruins. Now, it seemed that he was lucky that he had not encountered the ruins before. Otherwise, he would have lost his life. Time passed by slowly. Bailey Hongzhuang also tried to observe these small dots using the method Di Beichen had mentioned. As she entered a meditative state, she had a different feeling than before. She felt as if she was in the middle of a galaxy. A strange and mysterious feeling surrounded her, containing the complicated laws of heaven and earth. Baichen's gaze focused on these small dots. However, his gaze had already penetrated these small dots and looked deeper. Countless stars floated in front of his eyes. Finally, they dissipated one by one. All the stars were connected and finally merged into one point. That's right. That's it. Baichen's voice suddenly rang out, startling when Xiren and the others who were deep in thought. Everyone looked at Baichen. Could it be that Baichen had discovered the mystery of this place? Bailey Hongzhuang was immersed in the countless stars. She only felt that the originally extremely complicated stars were dissipating bit by bit. The pattern was becoming simpler and simpler. However, just as Baichen's voice fell, the light dots in front of everyone's eyes suddenly dissipated. Then, the scene in front of them changed. In their line of sight, the originally deep and dark path had disappeared. A large hall appeared in front of everyone. Obviously, they had left the small world from before. Bailey Hongzhuang also opened her eyes. Looking at the scene in front of her, her eyes were filled with faint joy. I see. She had also discovered some clues to the solution. However, Baichen's solution speed was much faster than hers. Therefore, he had led them out of the small world first. Baichen's lips curled into a faint smile. Looks like my wife has also discovered the solution. Not as fast as you. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled brightly. Baichen's perception was very strong, so she was also very happy. If my wife hadn't reminded me, I'm afraid I don't know when I would have figured this out. Baichen's gaze towards Bailey Hongzhuang became increasingly gentle. Previously, all of them had fallen into a misconception. If Bailey Hongzhuang hadn't mentioned this point, they probably wouldn't have been able to wake up from the previous scene. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly. I just couldn't figure out. That's why I had no choice but to use this analogy. You were the one who discovered it first. You two don't have to be modest with each other. You two are the best, as expected of husband and wife. Chapter 40-46. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang and Baichen could not help but smile at each other. Indeed, they were the most compatible. There's a large hall in front. Why don't we go and take a look? Bailey Hongzhuang suggested. Everyone nodded. Everyone wanted to know what kind of treasures were in the ruins. The sooner they arrived, the higher their chances of obtaining them. I think our speed is already considered fast. I'm afraid there aren't many people faster than us. When Xiren's face rippled with a thoughtful light. Their speed was definitely not slow. After all, they had discovered that they had entered the small world not long after entering. Although it took some time to find the small, it was definitely not slow overall. In addition, Baichen's comprehension was already very high, but he still took such a long time. Presumably, the others would not be much faster. That's right. Maybe we've already seized the opportunity. Ren Ziheng agreed. Let's go and take a look. There might be treasures in the large hall. In the next moment, everyone quickened their pace and walked forward. However, although they were fast, they did not let their guard down. After all, no one knew if there would be unknown dangers here. If they were fall into danger because of a moment of carelessness, it would be terrible. Fortunately, it was safe all the way. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others successfully walked into the large hall. However, when they arrived at the large hall, they found that it was empty. There was nothing inside. Seeing this, everyone could not help but feel puzzled. They thought that they would find some treasures after breaking out of the small world. They did not expect to find nothing. Could it be that we're late and the treasures here have already been taken away? Rinzume could not help but ask. There shouldn't be nothing in such a big place. If that's the case, then only the most famous experts in the three forces can do this. Ren Ziheng's face was somewhat emotional. I just hope it's not Li Boyo and the others. Bailey Hongzhuang looked around. It was still the same black wall tiles. However, there was a faint trace of gold on these wall tiles, revealing a bit of magnificence and nobility. It seemed that the owner of this ruin was also a wealthy person, because she could see that the golden color on the bricks was the real gold. Using gold to decorate these bricks and decorating them in such a low-key manner, It could be seen that the craftsman's taste was not bad. This place is so strange. Shangguan Yingying looked around and saw the surroundings clearly. She couldn't help but say, "The path we took leads to this hall, and there's no other path. Could it be that we've walked into a dead end?" Impossible. After hearing Shangguan Yingying's guess, Di Beichen had already made his judgment. This is definitely not a dead end. I'm afraid there's something fishy going on here. Mo Yunjue nodded. Looks like the owner of this ruin really likes to set up checkpoints. Up until now, we haven't seen anything, but we have to keep breaking through them. It's probably a hobby of the owner of the ruins. Ao Lingxiao spread out his hands. The characteristics of the ruins indicated the personality of the owner of the ruins. The ruins were completely created by him, so the layout of the ruins was naturally up to him. Chapter 4047. Bailey Hongzhuang raised her eyebrows. That means that the way to find the next path should be in this grand hall. Everyone, look carefully and see if there are any special places. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, the crowd did not delay any longer and started to search. After the first experience, everyone was no longer as lost as before. On the contrary, everyone was able to calm down and pay attention to their surroundings. Even such a small dot could be the key to passing the stage. Then they had to be extremely careful. However, at this moment, Mo Yunjue pointed to a protruding rock in front of the grand hall and said, "Do you guys think? The switch should not be this rock, right?" Once this was said, everyone's gaze fell onto the rock. Indeed, that rock was clearly protruding. Although at first glance, it was impossible to discover its existence. But after a closer look, one would be able to discover it. If it's this, isn't it a little too simple? Shangguan Yingying could not help but scratch her head. According to the previous experience, passing the stage should be extremely complicated. If it was such an obvious mechanism, then it felt a little different from what they had imagined. Everyone looked at each other and were momentarily unable to make up their minds. Bailey Hongzhuang walked to the front of the mechanism, and after examining it carefully, she could not help but say, "This mechanism is really too obvious. Could it be that it is not a mechanism to pass the stage, but a dangerous mechanism?" Everyone fell into silence. Bailey Hongzhuang said the same thing that they were thinking about. This was indeed very possible. With such an obvious mechanism, anyone who looked carefully would be able to notice it. Compared to the previous situation, this was really too simple. Why don't we first look around to see if there are any other mechanisms? If we don't find any, then we can try this mechanism. What do you guys think? Di Beichen suggested. All right, everyone agreed. This was the most reliable method. Following this, Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest of the 9 people started to search around. However, no matter how they searched, they did not find anything. In the end, everyone's gaze locked onto the obvious mechanism. "Looks like we can only try this mechanism," Mo Yunjue said calmly. "Then let's give it a try." Bailey Hongzhuang nodded. Everyone has to be extra careful. Problems can happen at any time. A solemn expression appeared on everyone's faces. After Mo Yunjue pressed the mechanism, everyone carefully paid attention to their surroundings, wary of any unforeseen events that might occur. Ka. All they heard was the sound of a mechanism turning. Immediately after, everyone was surprised to find that a large door had opened on their right. Everyone was stunned when they saw this scene. It can't be. Is this mechanism really that simple? Shangguan Yingying couldn't help but be speechless. I'm starting to wonder if there are 2 masters in this ruin. Their styles are just too different. Chu Jinfeng shrugged, but he couldn't help but smile. After all, he had found a next path. Ren Ziheng also relaxed a little. No matter what, as long as we know what to do next, it's good. Chapter 4048. This was because there was an army of skeletons behind the door. Heavens, what's going on? How could there be so many skeletons? Shangguan Yingying cried out in surprise as her face sank. At a rough glance, the skeletons in front of them numbered in the thousands. Compared to the 9 of them, the disparity was too great. I take back what I've said earlier. There must be only one owner in this ruin, and the owner of this ruin must be very abnormal. Chu Jinfeng stared blankly at the same spot. In his line of sight was another enormous hall. This hall was 10 times bigger than the hall they were in. An army of over 1,000 skeletons was gathered there, forming a black mass. This feeling was simply suffocating. Ao Lingxiao couldn't help but swallow his saliva. This scene was indeed a little shocking. At that moment, he even felt that his mind was in a complete mess. He couldn't think of what to do next. Could it be that the mechanism really isn't a mechanism to pass the trial, but a dangerous mechanism? Bailey Hongzhuang frowned. Although the scene in front of her was extremely shocking, she still managed to calm down. After all, there was no use in being anxious at this time. If they had found the wrong mechanism, then they must find the right mechanism in order to have any hope of leaving this place. Otherwise, when faced with this army of over 1,000 skeletons, they would be exhausted to death by taking turns to fight them. Look, there's a passageway on the right side of the hall opposite us. Mo Yunjue's sharp eyes noticed the situation in the hall and immediately pointed it out. Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest looked in the direction Mo Yunjue was pointing at. Indeed, as he had said, there was a passageway there. This means that this army of skeletons in front of us is very likely to be a test for us. Only after passing through this army of skeletons can we reach the rear, Di Beichan said in a low voice. There are so many skeletons. With just the 9 of us, I'm afraid it'll be very difficult. Xiren frowned. If a large group of cultivators had appeared together to deal with these skeletons, it would be possible for them to pass the trial. However, there were only 9 of them. Even if their abilities were not bad, it was almost impossible for them to pass through this situation. At that moment, everyone's hearts sank. This was simply an impossible task. The skeleton army didn't give Bailey Hongzhuang and the others any time to think. They immediately rushed towards them. The sound of heavy and orderly footsteps could be heard. All the skeletons seemed to treat them as intruders. Their eyes flickered with a demonic glint, and they only wanted to kill Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. What should we do? Rinzime couldn't help but exclaim. Looking at the skeleton army that was constantly rushing over, she felt an indescribable pressure. There's no other way. We can only give it a try. Bailey Hongzhuang said in a deep voice. It wasn't easy for him to get here, so he definitely couldn't give up just like that. She believed that since the owner of the ruins had made such an arrangement, there must be a possibility of breaking through. Otherwise, the ruins would be dead and useless. Let's give it a try, Di Beichan said. After seeing how determined Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichan were, everyone gave up on the idea of running away. Chapter 4049. In the next moment, vigorous primary energy exploded from everyone's bodies as their contracted beasts came out to help in the battle. Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest faced the incoming skeleton army with burning fighting spirit in their eyes as they fully unleashed their strongest combat power. Bang! Bang, bang, bang. One after another, martial arts techniques were unleashed from Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest. However, when they unleashed their martial arts techniques, everyone restrained themselves. This was because they were in the ruins and not in the outside world. If the destructive power of their martial arts techniques was too great, it was very likely that they would directly destroy the ruins. If the ruins were turned into ruins, then they would naturally be buried here. This undoubtedly caused everyone to be somewhat restrained. Bailey Hongzhuang took out her 9-tailed zither as her pitch-black phoenix eyes flickered with a bright luster. I'll try to use sound waves to attack in a straight line. Our goal is not to destroy all these skeletons, but to head to the passage over there. Bailey Hongzhuang's suggestion undoubtedly brought a glimmer of hope to everyone, and they immediately nodded. All right, this was the only way that had the highest success rate at the moment. Otherwise, it would be too difficult to pass through so many skeletons. The sound of the zither poured out from Bailey Hongzhuang's 5 fingers. The pleasant sound of the zither was a nightmare to the skeletons. However, after exchanging blows, Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest realized that these skeletons were much stronger than the skeletons they had encountered outside. These skeletons are too strong. With my strength, I can't break through it all. Shangguan Yingying's pretty face could not help but reveal a trace of panic. Originally, when she faced skeletons in the training grounds, although they were not considered to be extremely strong, at least she had no problem dealing with them. Previously, when she was outside the ruins, she had already felt a great increase in pressure. However, she now realized that the skeletons in the ruins were much stronger than before. Facing skeletons of such strength, it was simply a problem for her to persevere. When Xiren stood beside Shangguan Yingying, the two of them had to join forces to resist the skeleton's attacks. However, this was only a temporary defense. It was simply too difficult to pass through all of this under such circumstances. Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but walk over to Shangguan Yingying's side. At the same time, Di Beichen and Mo Yunjue also went to help Chu Jinfeng and the others. They were all at the Astral Radiance realm, so they could still put up a fight against these skeletons. However, cultivators below the Astral Radiance realm would have a hard time dealing with these skeletons. The skeletons outside have only been nourished outside the ruins for a period of time, and their strength has increased so much. These skeletons have been staying in the ruins for who knows how many years. Naturally, their strength is extraordinary. Di Beichen's expression was solemn. Based on the current situation, they only had one path, but this path was so difficult that it was difficult to choose. At this moment, Bailey Hongzhuang finally understood why A.O. Lingxiao had said that to enter the upper realm, one had to be at the Astral Radiance realm or above. Otherwise, those below the Astral Radiance realm would not be able to pass through the group of skeletons. Thinking about it, the skeletons in the upper realm were about the same as the skeletons in front of them. Let's try our best to charge through. If we really can't, we'll give up. Chapter 4050. Although Bailey Hongzhuang was very interested in the inheritance of the ruins, they had to consider the big picture. Apart from the three of them who had already broken through to the Starlight Realm, the others obviously felt a huge pressure. In comparison, they would rather not enter the ruins and have everyone be safe. After all, they were a team, and no one was willing to see their teammates get injured because they were risking their lives. Di Beichen nodded. Okay. Compared to the lives of Xiren and the others, the inheritance was not that important. Mo Yunjue did not speak. To him, this kind of thing was not within the scope of his consideration. In fact, he, who grew up in the Heavenly Slaughter Tower, did not have such emotions. The most important thing was his own interests. Giving up his own interests for the sake of everyone was undoubtedly an extremely stupid move to him. However, the only one he cared about was Bailey Hongzhuang. No matter what decision Bailey Hongzhuang made, he had no objections. After seeing Bailey Hongzhuang and the others make such a decision, Xiren and the others felt even more pressure in their hearts. No one would be willing to give up such a good opportunity. However, just because they were holding back, they had implicated Bailey Hongzhuang and the others to give up as well. They felt that they had let down Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. In the next moment, Shangguan Yingying and Wen Xiren could not help but look at each other, and then nodded affirmatively. Then, the two of them displayed their strongest martial skills together. Bang! An astonishing wave spread out, causing Bailey Hongzhuang and the others who were fighting to turn their gazes away. Their eyes flashed with astonishment. They did not expect Wen Xiren and Shangguan Yingying to be able to burst out with such an attack. After the two of them displayed their joint martial skill, an incomparably tyrannical force appeared. Then the skeletons in the line in front of them turned into powder. Quick, let's move forward, Xiren hurriedly said. Right now, the only thing they could do was to seize this opportunity and move forward quickly. After opening up a gap, they would quickly close in. Otherwise, if they were delayed, they would really have no strength left. Even though everyone was shocked by the might of Xiren and Wen Xinya's combined martial skill, they knew that now was not the time to be concerned about this point. Immediately, their figures flashed, and they quickly rushed into the middle of the skeleton army. As they walked into the center, the pressure from the skeletons from all directions increased. Instantly, everyone formed a circle with their backs against each other and moved forward together. From the moment they chose to break into the encirclement, they already had no way out. Just as they were moving forward with all their might, a commotion suddenly came from ahead. Rumble. One of the walls of the hall, where the skeleton army was located, was suddenly opened. This scene was similar to what they had experienced before. Then, a conversation not far away entered their ears. I didn't expect that the mechanism to lead to the next place would actually be here. This is great. In my opinion, we must be the fastest team. The other cultivators' speed can't be compared to ours. Of course. Don't you know who's leading our team? Even the sect leader praised Senior Brother Lee's comprehension. If it wasn't for Senior Brother Lee leading us, I'm afraid we wouldn't know how long we would be trapped in that damn place. Chapter 4051. Listening to their conversation, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others couldn't help but look at each other. They secretly guessed that this so-called Senior Brother Lee couldn't be the Li Boyo they didn't want to see, right? If that was the case, it would be too much of a coincidence. As the door gradually opened, the appearance of the cultivator inside also appeared in the line of sight of Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others couldn't help but feel their hearts skip a beat. It was really a small world. The person they didn't want to meet the most just happened to meet him. It can't be, right? How can it be so coincidental? We just wanted to avoid Li Boyo, and this guy just happened to meet us. Shangguan Yingying looked helpless. It wasn't easy to deceive Li Boyo before. No one knew when this Li Boyo would figure everything out and come back to his senses. If this guy suddenly figured out how to deal with them, then it would be troublesome. The heavens don't do as we wish. The heavens really don't open their eyes. Chu Jinfeng couldn't help but sigh. Looking at Shangguan Yingying and Chu Jinfeng's helpless appearance, Bailey Hongzhuang couldn't help but chuckle. Actually, this is also expected. Li Boyo's strength is so tyrannical, it can be seen that his comprehension is also very high. Now, the cultivator teams that can break through here are all strong teams. It's normal for him to appear here. Usually, the comprehension of strong cultivators was not low. Otherwise, it would be very difficult for them to achieve such achievements at such a young age. Therefore, it was reasonable for Li Boyo to be able to comprehend it so quickly. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Ren Ziheng and the others couldn't help but nod. There were only a few possibilities for the cultivators to appear here. As long as they were fast enough, it could be said that it was inevitable for them to meet Li Boyo and the others. But it's good that these guys appeared. It's too much pressure for us to deal with these skeletons alone. With them here, they can naturally share some of the pressure. In a way, this guy can be considered to have helped us a little. Di Beichan said with a faint smile. Li Boyo obviously did not expect to meet Bailey Hongzhuang and the others here. Seeing them surprised him even more than seeing the group of skeletons. The faces of the cultivators who had said that Li Boyo would be the first batch to arrive turned ugly to behold. They had wanted to flatter Li Boyo. Unexpectedly, someone else had arrived before them. Their faces could not help but turn ugly to behold. Li Boyo naturally thought of this as well. His expression revealed some embarrassment, and a layer of haze quietly covered his eyes. Previously, he did not pay much attention to Bailey Hongzhuang and her team. After all, this team was not large. Although Bailey Hongzhuang was quite famous, that was only in the field of medical skills. He had never paid much attention to her strength. However, such a small team that he had overlooked had actually arrived here faster than them. This was something that he found hard to accept. Isn't this Bailey Hongzhuang and others from Penglai Palace? I didn't expect to meet him again so soon. Why are there so many skeletons? They are completely surrounded by these skeletons. The cultivators in the team quickly focused their attention on these skeletons. After all, their main purpose now was to seize the inheritance in this ruin. The most important thing was to find the next place. Chapter 4052. At the same time, Li Buoyou also sized up the situation in front of him. Since Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were able to arrive here earlier than them, it proved that they were true geniuses. Their comprehension was actually stronger than his. The other party would definitely not appear there for no reason. If they wanted to escape, they would definitely have a chance. Thinking of this, Li Buoyou carefully sized up his surroundings. With this observation, he suddenly realized that there was a passage behind the skeleton army. According to the position of Bailey Hongzhuang and the others, it was obvious that they wanted to pass through the skeleton army and head to the passage. I see. Li Buoyou suddenly understood and could not help but sigh in his heart. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were only 9 people. Facing the skeleton army of thousands, they actually had the courage to charge forward. Just this courage alone was amazing. If it was an ordinary team, they would probably have lost the confidence to continue fighting after seeing such a huge skeleton army. At this moment, Li Buoyou also changed his previous neglect of Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. For them to be able to do this, it could be said that their courage was commendable. They were really not ordinary people. Perhaps his younger brother had really died in their hands because it was impossible for ordinary cultivators to kill Li Yunyu. Let's speed up and enter the passage as well. Li Buoyou's voice was loud and firm. He would rather kill the wrong person than let them go. Regardless of whether the people who killed Li Yunyu were Bailey Hongzhuang and the others, since someone had pointed out this point, it proved that it was possible. He wanted to avenge his younger brother and would not let go of any possibility. However, the most important thing now was not to deal with Bailey Hongzhuang and the others, but to obtain the inheritance of this ruin. As Li Buoyou's voice fell, the cultivators and his team nodded one after another. I'll take the lead in a while. You guys follow behind me. Don't get separated by the skeleton army. Otherwise, there's nothing we can do. Li Buoyou reminded the people behind him. Under such circumstances, everyone could only move forward together. Once they were separated by the skeleton army, the others would not be able to rescue them in time. Senior Brother Li, don't worry. We understand. The cultivators and the team revealed a look of understanding. Even though the skeleton army in front of them was very frightening, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others only had 9 people and dared to charge in. In comparison, their team had more than 20 people. Their combat power was much stronger than the other party. The next moment, Li Buoyou and the others also joined the battle. Sure enough, since Li Buoyou and the others appeared, the skeleton army split up to deal with them. As a result, the pressure on Bailey Hongzhuang and the others lessened significantly. After all, they had lost half of their opponents. Naturally, they no longer felt as oppressive as before. The timing of Li Buoyou's appearance is really timely. They've solved a big problem for us. A smile appeared on Xiren's face. Previously, the situation had forced him to force a smile. Now that the pressure had lessened, he felt much more at ease. Chapter 4053. They were the first group to reach this place, and they could not be overtaken by the other party. They had taken great pains to seize the initiative, and they had to grasp it firmly in their own hands. After all, they had spent so much effort to reach this place. According to their judgment, the path ahead had always been a test. Perhaps there would be treasures behind them. If they were overtaken by the other party here, it would be too disappointing. Following Shangwan Yingying's words, everyone could not help but straighten their expressions. Junior sister Shangwan is right. We have to charge forward with all our might. Bailey Hongzhuang gently nodded her delicate head, and the sound of her guqin poured out. Vigorous yuan power was mixed in the sound of her guqin and formed a straight attack under her control. Bailey Hongzhuang's guqin opened the path, and Deep Beichen and Mo Yinjue's attacks followed closely behind Bailey Hongzhuang, widening the path once again. At the same time, when Xiren and the others were not slow at all. After Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 2 had opened the path, they rushed forward as fast as they could. Before the skeleton army came in full force again, they advanced as fast as they could. Although this method consumed a lot of yuan power, it was undeniable that their speed was not slow. Li Boyo and the others were also attacking with all their might. The power that the 20 over people exploded with was naturally very terrifying. Just like how they had been able to enter the ruins at the fastest speed, one could see how powerful their combat power was. Their speed was not slow at all. The skeleton army's numbers were extremely terrifying, and their powers were extremely powerful. On a normal day, they often went to the training grounds to train and understood these skeletons very well. Not only that, their combat power was the strongest in the Crimson Moon sect, and they had worked together for a long time. Their tacit understanding was extremely high. They had originally thought that their speed would definitely surpass Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. However, they had never thought that Bailey Hongzhuang and the others would advance at a speed that was not any slower than theirs. Instantly, their eyes were filled with a thick sense of astonishment. I did not expect that although the number of cultivators from Penglai Palace is small, their fighting style is very special. They are able to maintain this speed even when surrounded by so many skeletons. They are quite capable. Qian Feilong's eyes flashed with astonishment. As an expert of the Crimson Moon sect, his eyesight was naturally not bad. Recently, Bailey Hongzhuang was really in the limelight. He also knew that the sect had sent people to recruit her, but they were not successful. Because of this, he had always been very curious about Bailey Hongzhuang. He wanted to know what kind of person could actually make such a name for herself. After all, according to his understanding of the situation, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others had only been on Penglai Island for a year. In such a short time, they were able to directly become inner disciples of Penglai Palace and obtain the recruitment of the three major forces. This ability was really not something that ordinary people could have. Now that he saw them, he realized that Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were also very strong. In comparison, he could not have reached this step at such a young age. It seems that we have underestimated them before. We have to go all out now. Otherwise, we might really let these people take the initiative. That would be terrible. Chapter 4054. No matter what treasures there were, the cultivators who arrived first would definitely reap the most benefits. If they were late, the treasures would fall into someone else's hands. Let's speed up. We can't let these juniors see us as a joke, Li Boyo said calmly, but there was a hint of coldness in his tone. He had always been the most popular cultivator in the Crimson Moon sect. How could he let a few rising stars from the Penglai Palace steal his limelight? As Li Boyo's voice fell, Qian Feilong and the others couldn't help but shudder. They had been teammates with Li Boyo for so long, so they understood his temperament very well. Such a tone meant that he was starting to feel displeased. In the next moment, everyone sped up. Indeed, under such circumstances, if Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were to steal the initiative, they would lose face if word got out. Immediately, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others realized that Li Boyo and the others had completely unleashed their speed. Their speed could be said to be abnormally fast. Seeing this, they did not dare to delay. After all, whoever was the fastest would be able to steal the initiative. Just as Bailey Hongzhuang and Li Boyo's teams were competing, another wall suddenly opened. Hearing this familiar voice, the cultivators in Bailey Hongzhuang and Li Boyo's teams could not help but look at the opening door. They did not know which faction's cultivators had appeared this time. Could it be the cultivators from the 100 Flowers Gate? Shangguan Yingying could not help but wonder. Now that the teams from the Penglai Palace and the Crimson Moon sect had appeared, only the 100 Flowers Gates team had yet to appear. Perhaps it was the 100 Flowers Gates team that had appeared at this moment. I don't know. We'll know if we keep watching. I just hope it's not the Crimson Moon sect's team, when Xiren said. Li Boyo and the others had unleashed their speed very quickly. In comparison, they only had a slight advantage. If it was the Crimson Moon sect's team that appeared, then they would naturally be no match for them once the two teams worked together. At the same time, Li Boyo and the others were also secretly guessing the team that might appear. They only hoped that it was not the Penglai Palace's team. It would be better if it was the 100 Flowers Gate. This way, the three factions would be able to combine forces. As the tightly shut door gradually opened, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others also saw the cultivators inside. After seeing the familiar clothes, everyone's eyes could not help but light up. These are the clothes of the Penglai Palace. Bailey Hongzhuang immediately noticed the other party's clothes. From this point alone, she could tell which power the other party belonged to. Di Bei-chun and the others also had smiles on their faces. As long as it was the team of their Penglai Palace, then in the face of the Red Moon sect, they would be a whole. This was good news. Compared to the joy of Bailey Hongzhuang and the others, the faces of Li Boyo and the others had become ugly. Originally, Bailey Hongzhuang's group of 9 people was not enough for them to worry about. Now that a team from Penglai Palace had appeared, they didn't know who they were. Could it be Wan Yinling and the others? Qian Feilong secretly guessed. Wan Yinling was the strongest cultivator in the Penglai Palace. Normally, the competition between him and Li Boyo was quite intense. In fact, their strength was about the same. However, the Penglai Palace's reputation was stronger than the Crimson Moon sect's. Therefore, Wan Yinling's reputation was more prominent. Chapter 4055. Hearing Qian Feilong's guess, Li Boyo's face turned cold. He had been competing with Wan Yinling for so many years. Although their strengths were similar and they had always been tied, Wan Yinling's reputation had always been better than his because he belonged to Penglai Palace. Regarding this point, it could be said that he was extremely unconvinced. Therefore, he had always wanted to defeat Wan Yinling to prove that he was the strongest. At the same time, he could also fight for Crimson Moon sect. However, every time his strength increased and he challenged Wan Yinling, he would find that Wan Yinling had also improved. From the beginning to the end, the two of them could not determine a winner. However, Wan Yinling's reputation was still higher than his. As the door was completely opened, the appearance of the cultivators in the team appeared in front of Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. Ren Ziheng's eyes flashed with surprise. It's senior brother Wan Yin and the others. The faces of Di Bei-chun and the others also showed a light of understanding. Wan Yinling was the strongest person in their Penglai Palace. Ever since they joined Penglai Palace, they were not unfamiliar with the name Wan Yinling. As the strongest cultivator in Penglai Palace, he was naturally in the limelight. However, he spent most of his time in seclusion. Therefore, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others had not seen his true face. Therefore, they did not have much interaction with him. Wan Yinling clearly did not expect that there were 2 other teams that had arrived here before them. A surprised look appeared on his handsome face. However, it disappeared in the blink of an eye. It was so fast that it was hard to notice. I didn't expect it to be so lively here, Wan Yinling said slowly. A smile appeared on his lips. Your reputation as Penglai Palace's #1 master is undeserved. Your junior brothers and sisters are all faster than you, Li Boyo said in a mocking tone. Hearing this, Wan Yinling did not care at all. There are talented people in every generation. Our Penglai Palace's outstanding disciples come in batches. I will be happier if they can surpass me. In comparison, your Crimson Moon sect has always needed you to shoulder the burden. You can imagine the difference between the two. Li Boyo originally wanted to take this opportunity to mock Wan Yinling. He didn't expect Wan Yinling to turn the tables on him. He couldn't think of a rebuttal for a while. His face instantly turned ugly. Wan Yinling, don't talk nonsense. Recently, your limelight in Penglai Palace has been completely stolen by these newcomers. No matter how you pretend, it is useless. Wan Yinling chuckled. Li Boyo, I am not as narrow-minded as you. I am very happy that the Penglai Palace has a new excellent practitioner. I will not have the slightest intention of suppressing them. If they can really surpass me and become the #1 master of Penglai Palace, I will be convinced. But you have always boasted that you are the most outstanding young master. How come I heard that your brother was killed a few days ago? You can't even protect your own younger brother. This doesn't seem to match the title you emphasize, does it? Hearing Wan Yinling's words, Li Boyo's eyes became gloomy. He immediately lowered his voice and said, Wan Yinling, I heard that my brother died at the hands of your Penglai Palace disciples. Chapter 4056. Listening to Wan Yanling's casual and even sarcastic words, Li Boyo's eyes suddenly burned with anger. Li Yunyu was his younger brother, and their relationship was usually very good. Now that Li Yunyu had been killed, although he didn't know who did it, since they dared to kill Li Boyo's younger brother, then they were going against him. Once he caught the murderer, he would make them pay a heavy price. What nonsense are you talking about? Li Boyo glared at him. Maybe some despicable person attacked my younger brother when I wasn't paying attention, intending to injure me. Hearing Li Boyo's words, Wan Yanling said nonchalantly, Li Boyo, you don't need to test me here. If I want to kill your brother, I could have done it openly. Why would I need to hide? Even if it wasn't you, it was someone from Penglai Palace. Li Boyo's eyebrows were cold. Although he hated Wan Yanling, he also knew his character. If it was really him, Wan Yanling would admit it frankly because they both saw each other as a thorn in their side. If they could make each other unhappy, they were always very happy. Looking at Li Boyo and Wan Yanling's tit-for-tat appearance, Bailey Hongzhuang and others couldn't help but look at each other. Originally, they thought that meeting Li Boyo was a big trouble for them. They didn't expect that after Wan Yanling appeared, it would become a tit-for-tat between Li Boyo and Wan Yanling. It seemed that they had nothing to do with it. This was really beyond their expectations. At this time, Ren Ziheng, who knew some inside information, couldn't help but say, Senior brother Wan Yan and Li Boyo have always been in a competitive relationship. When they meet each other, they usually compete like this. But until now, no one can do anything to the other. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang was a little surprised. They are evenly matched? According to her judgment, Wan Yanling, as the top master of Penglai Palace, should be stronger than Li Boyo. Ren Ziheng nodded. It used to be like this. But senior brother Wan Yan's reputation is better than Li Boyo's because senior brother Wan Yanhan was also the top master of Penglai Palace. His fame was unique. Wan Yanhan. Ao Ling Xiao was a little surprised. Why haven't I heard of him? Brother Wan Yan went out 3 years ago and never came back. We don't know where he went, but we heard that he went out to train and won't be back for a while. Ren Ziheng also had a puzzled look on his face. Many disciples of the Penglai Palace were extremely curious about Wan Yanhan's whereabouts. However, Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichun couldn't help but look at each other. They already had some guesses in their hearts. Come to think of it, the place Wan Yanhan went to should be the upper realm. Because Ren Ziheng had yet to break through to the Starlight realm, he wasn't very clear about this situation. However, Wan Yanling and Li Boyo both knew about this matter. So that's how it is, Di Beichun said. Senior brother Wan Yanhan is also a genius. In the past, when senior brother Wan Yanhan was still around, there were many female disciples from the 100 Flowers Gate and Crimson Moon sect who admired him. Unfortunately, there was no news of him after that. Renzime could not help but say. Chapter 4057. Following Ren Ziheng's words, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others' eyes lit up. If Wan Yanling could defeat Li Boyo, it would be a good thing. The battle between Li Boyo and Wan Yanling only lasted for a short time. Everyone put all their attention on dealing with the skeleton army. Even though there were already 3 teams, the skeleton army's combat power could not be underestimated. If they were not careful, they might lose their lives here. Junior sister Bailey, if you can't hold on, you can come closer to us. We can help you. Wan Yanling looked at Bailey Hongzhuang. Although he had never seen Bailey Hongzhuang before, he had heard many descriptions and stories about Bailey Hongzhuang. Therefore, he could recognize Bailey Hongzhuang even though it was his first time seeing her. Moreover, it was said that Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were all very good-looking. He thought that there would be no other team that could make him feel unfamiliar with such an outstanding team. Thank you, senior brother Wan Yan, Bailey Hongzhuang replied. Now, among the 3 teams, Bailey Hongzhuang's team was the closest to the exit. Wan Yanling and the others had just arrived, so their progress was naturally the slowest. If they waited for Wan Yanling and the others to help, their speed would undoubtedly be slower than Li Boyo. This was not a situation that Bailey Hongzhuang and the others wanted to see. Therefore, everyone still burst forth with full speed and quickly moved forward. The originally huge pressure had been reduced a lot after the three teams shared it. Previously, everyone only felt that it was difficult to move forward. Now that they were careful, they could still move forward. Wang Yanling and Li Boyo's teams burst forth with their fastest speed. The two teams were originally in a competitive relationship. No matter where they were, they would compete. Therefore, this was also the place where they competed. Whoever was faster would be the winner. Just as the three teams were moving forward at full speed, a new team appeared. After the other team appeared, they realized that they were cultivators from the 100 Flowers Gate. The cultivators of the 100 Flowers Gate clearly did not expect three groups to arrive first. Surprise appeared on their faces, but did not last long before it was diverted by the Black Skeleton Army. Why are there so many skeletons? The power of darkness is what nourishes the skeletons. This situation is within our expectations. You should be more careful. Wang Yanling smiled faintly as he looked at the cultivators of the 100 Flower Gate. Compared to the constant competition between the Crimson Moon sect and the Penglai Palace, their relationship with the 100 Flower Gate was much friendlier. After all, the 100 Flower Gate mainly focused on medicine and alchemy. Although they also focused on increasing their strength, they could not compare to the Penglai Palace and the Crimson Moon sect. Thank you for your reminder, Brother Wang Yan. The cultivators of the 100 Flowers Gate immediately joined the group. Although they were usually weaker than the Penglai Palace and the Crimson Moon sect in terms of cultivation, no one was willing to give up on the legacy of the ruins. As a result, they had to take the risk. After all, once he obtained the inheritance, he would no longer be the same as before. Chapter 4058. The other teams had at least 20 people. In comparison, their team only had 9 people, not even half of the other teams. What's more, the other teams were the top teams of the 3 major forces. Their teammates' combat power was also extremely strong, but they were much weaker. Fortunately, because they came the least, they still had a certain advantage. However, once the other team caught up, it would be very difficult for them to snatch the treasures and inheritance from the other teams with their strength. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others couldn't help but look at each other with a heavy heart. Now, they didn't have time to waste. They had to finish everything as soon as possible. In the next moment, Bailey Hongzhuang's zither music rang out crazily. An invisible sound wave spread out. The skeletons in front of her all fell down or turned into nothingness after being attacked by the sound waves. Di Beichen and Mo Yunjue also unleashed their combat power to the best. Not only did it not affect the ruins, but the effect was also excellent. Xiren and Shangwan Yingying were not willing to be left behind. Long before, the two of them had already begun to practice the combination martial arts. It was just that the combination martial arts were far more difficult to practice than ordinary martial arts because it required an extremely high degree of tacit understanding between the two people. Once there was a slight problem with one person, it would lead to the failure of the martial arts. It was precisely because of this that for so long they had not performed this martial arts in front of others. However, after the two of them successfully performed this martial arts just now, the two of them also had a little more confidence. Under such a situation of full eruption, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other speed was not slower than Li Boyo and the others. Seeing this scene, the other 3 teams couldn't help but be surprised. Speaking of which, they didn't find it strange that the 3 teams appeared here, but the appearance of Bailey Hongzhuang's team was a bit abrupt. The most important thing was that the team with the least number of people and the weakest strength was now at the forefront. Brother Wang Yan, who is that in your Penglai Palace? I didn't expect your Penglai Palace to have such a powerful rising star. By Ingtian of the 100 Flowers Gate couldn't help but ask. Hearing this, Wang Yanling chuckled as he fought. Believe me, if I say their names, you will realize that you must have heard of them before. Bai Yingtian was slightly stunned and looked at Wang Yanling in surprise. Oh, could it be that they are very famous? Bailey Hongzhuang. You should have heard of her. Wang Yanling chuckled. She is now the pride of our Penglai Palace. With Wan Yinling's words, the cultivators of the 100 Flowers Gate all showed great shock. Bailey Hongzhuang, Bai Ying Tian couldn't help but look in the direction of Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. Is that the one who developed the drug to suppress dark energy, Bailey Hongzhuang? That's right. Wan Yinling nodded. That's her. I have long heard of Bailey Hongzhuang's name, but I have never seen her face. I didn't expect her to be such a beauty and so powerful. It's really surprising. Bai Ying Tian couldn't help but sigh. He only thought that Wan Yinling was dedicated to studying medicine, but he didn't expect that Wan Yinling was also not lagging behind in cultivation, which was beyond his expectations. Chapter 4059. Currently, Bailey Hongzhuang's team was extremely famous among the three major sections. However, other than the disciples of Penglai Palace, the 100 Flowers Gate and Crimson Moon sect had only heard of her name, but did not know what she looked like. The disciples of the 100 Flowers Gate were extremely curious about this genius doctor. They had long heard that she was very young, but when they saw her in person, they could not help but be shocked. This was because she was really too young. When they talked about her, Bailey Hongzhuang also gave them a polite smile. However, all her attention was still on dealing with these skeletons. The four teams all pushed their speed to the limit. Bailey Hongzhuang's team was the weakest, but they attacked in a straight line, so their speed was not slow. Only the sound of weapons clashing could be heard in the entire hall. Because there were too few people, Bailey Hongzhuang's team was left with wounds. Among them, Ren Zimei, Shangguan Yingying, and the others were the most seriously injured because it was too difficult for them to deal with all this with their cultivation. Fresh blood dripped onto the ground, but the skeletons became even more excited and their attacks became even more violent. Under such circumstances, the other teams were faintly showing signs of surpassing them. Roar! White Lion let out a loud roar and pounced forward with its huge body, attacking the skeletons' lower bodies. At the same time, Xiao He and Xiao Bai's bodies became bigger and bigger under everyone's shocked gazes. Seeing this scene, not to mention Li Boyo and the others, even Ren Ziheng and the others revealed astonished expressions. They had been teammates with Bailey Hongzhuang for such a long time, but they did not know that Xiao He and Xiao Bai had such terrifying abilities. After becoming bigger, Xiao He and Xiao Bai could be said to be extremely strong. With a sweep of their hands, they cleared out the skeletons in front of them. Di Beichen's mystical fire demon rock spread its wings and flew into the air, with Shangguan Yingying on its back. The ruins prohibited flying. Cultivators could not float in the air, but the mystical fire demon rock could. Shangguan Yingying had obviously suffered heavy injuries. If she continued to stay here, it would be difficult for everyone to take care of her. It would be best if the mystical fire demon rock could bring Shangguan Yingying to the other side of the passage. Xiren's berserk, earth-shaking tiger also showed itself. It and White Lion stood on both sides of the team. Although it hadn't been growing for a long time, with Master Long's help, the berserk, earth-shaking tiger was no longer a child. It had reached adulthood. His majestic appearance was very domineering. With a tiger pounce, he directly pounced on a group of skeletons. Shangguan Yingying's deep-sea demonic flood dragon wasn't inferior either. They weren't on the surface of the sea, so its fighting power couldn't be maximized. However, the divine dragon's tail whip was still quite powerful. Under such circumstances, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others could be said to be getting faster and faster, and the distance that was gradually being pulled apart once again. Seeing this scene, the cultivators of the other three teams could not help but frown. The experts of the three major forces were all here, but the limelight was snatched away by the younger generation. They really felt a little embarrassed. The mystical fire demon rock did not disappoint everyone's expectations. It successfully brought Shangguan Yingying to the other side of the passage. Chapter 4060. Hongzhuang. These skeletons won't attack from behind. You guys come over quickly. Hearing Shangwan Yingying's words, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others couldn't help but reveal a joyful expression. Originally, they were worried that these skeletons would turn around and attack Shangwan Yingying. They didn't expect that their worry was unnecessary. This way, they would be able to escape even faster. Little Xian, you've really done a good job. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled as she looked at the mysterious fire devil rock flying back. She patted the little guy's head, although this little guy's body wasn't small. Little Xian obviously liked being praised. It immediately raised its head and flapped its wings. Its flying ability was very powerful. Immediately after, Renzime was also brought to the passage by the mysterious fire devil rock. Li Boyo and the others didn't expect Bailey Hongzhuang's team to think of such a method. Using contracted beasts to fly directly over, it was much more convenient than charging through from below. Unfortunately, there were very few flying contracted beasts and even fewer outstanding ones. Therefore, their team didn't have a powerful flying beast like the mysterious fire devil rock. I didn't expect this small team's foundation to be so strong. Not to mention, so many contracted beasts opening the way, even the mysterious fire devil rock came out. This kind of momentum is a little shocking. The mysterious fire devil rock is a first-class contracted beast. Normally, it's extremely difficult to obtain such a contracted beast. I didn't expect this kid to have one. Not to mention the mysterious fire devil rock, the violent earth-splitting tiger, and the deep-sea demonic flood dragon aren't easy to obtain. As for the two contracted beasts that can change their sizes, they're even more amazing. That white lion also looks extremely majestic. I can't even tell what species it is. No wonder this small team could make it here. Their ability is not simple. Li Boyo, by Ying Tian, and the others couldn't help but whisper. They were the strongest team in the Crimson Moon sect and the 100 Flower Gate. But in terms of wealth, they couldn't compare to Bailey Hongzhuang's team. Just like this, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others passed through the skeleton army's obstruction one by one and arrived at the entrance of the passage. After escaping danger, everyone could not help but heave a sigh of relief. Although the length of this hall wasn't very long, it was still difficult to walk from there to here. In just a short period of time, everyone's clothes were soaked in sweat and blood, and their injuries were not light. In the next moment, Bailey Hongzhuang and her team disappeared from the sight of the other three teams. Seeing them enter the hall at the back like this, Li Boyo and the rest were a little anxious. If the treasures were at the back, wouldn't they all be taken by Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest? Senior brother Li, they went there before us. What should we do? Li Boyo's face darkened. Let them go first. If they manage to snatch the treasure, we'll snatch it from them. If Li Boyo didn't have the intention to kill Bailey Hongzhuang and the others before, then he really wanted to kill them now. It was obvious that these fellows were rich. If he killed them, he would definitely gain a lot. What's more, he was also very dissatisfied with how these juniors had stolen the limelight. Chapter 4061. Hearing Li Boyo's words, the cultivators and the team all calmed down. Although the other party had many trump cards, if they were determined to deal with them, the other party would definitely not be a match for them. Since that was the case, they would let Bailey Hongzhuang and the others be complacent for a while. They would treat it as free labor to help them search for treasures. After that, they would wipe out Bailey Hongzhuang and the others in one fell swoop. Wang Yanling could not help but glance at Li Boyo. Although he could not hear what they were talking about, he could tell from the latter's expression that it was definitely not a good thing. After Bailey Hongzhuang and the others had broken through the Great Hall of Skeletons, they continued to move forward. The path in front of them was still pitch black. With the illumination of the night pearls, everyone could see the path under their feet clearly. The group did not move quickly because no one knew if they would encounter unknown dangers next. From the moment they entered the ruins until now, they had not seen any treasures at all. They had only experienced a few unnecessary dangers. After Bailey Hongzhuang fed Shangwan Yingying a pill, she asked aloud, "Yingying, how do you feel?" Shangwan Yingying nodded. Don't worry. Although I've suffered some injuries, most of them are superficial. It won't affect me. That's good. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at the others. Let's spread the healing medicine on your wounds first. The dark energy here is very strong. If we don't disperse it as soon as possible, it will cause a great impact. Everyone nodded. Healing their wounds was indeed very important. At this moment, Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but feel a little relieved. Fortunately, she had already developed a medicine to deal with the dark energy. Otherwise, the injuries they had suffered in the ruins would have greatly affected them. The group continued to move forward. The dark path seemed to have no end and no hope. In my opinion, Li Boyo and the others won't be able to catch up to us for a while. However, we don't know where the inheritance is. If we can't find it and the other party catches up to us, we'll be helpless. Xiren's face was filled with sorrow. He could not help but feel anxious because they had not found anything. Let's do our best. Deep Bachin patted Xiren's shoulder. If there was no one chasing after them, it would have been fine. However, there was someone following closely behind them. Everyone felt an indescribable sense of urgency. Mo Yunjua chimed in. Although time is very important, what's more important is one's own perception and luck. If you don't have such comprehension ability and luck, it will be useless no matter how early you go. There's no need to be too anxious. Hearing this, Xiren nodded. I hope so. His warm words were still filled with helplessness and worry. After all, their team's combat power was still a little weak. It was obvious that Li Boyo was not a good person. He was afraid that he would encounter a lot of trouble. Moreover, although Wan Yinling was their senior brother, no one knew if he would help them in this kind of place. Don't think too much. Look, there's a stone room. Bailey Hongzhuang pointed at a stone room not far away. Following Bailey Hongzhuang's words, everyone's eyes lit up. After walking for so long, they finally saw the stone room. Chapter 4062. In the next moment, Di Beichun pushed open the door of the stone room. There was no mechanism in the stone room. It was just a simple push, and the door opened. However, when everyone saw the situation inside, they couldn't help but widen their eyes and gasp. This is too extravagant, isn't it? Chu Jinfeng looked at the scene in front of him in a daze. He had heard that there were many treasures in the ruins, but he didn't expect it to be so rich. Rin Ziheng and Rin Zimei were also shocked by the scene in front of them. Looking around, the room was filled with treasures and spiritual stones. This scene was really shocking. In comparison, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were calmer. They had seen many treasures in the ruins before, but the scene in front of them was obviously more spectacular than they had imagined. Although Ao Lingxiao was a little surprised, he wasn't too shocked. After all, he came from the upper realm and knew about this kind of thing. Many owners of the ruins would leave their treasures in the ruins. As a result, the inheritor's wealth would increase greatly. The owner of the ruins had mastered the power of darkness. His achievements must have been very shocking, so it was normal for him to have such wealth. These spiritual stones seemed to be different from the ones we usually use. Di Beichun looked at the pile of spiritual stones in front of him and felt that the spiritual energy in them was much richer than the ones they usually used. Hearing this, Ao Lingxiao explained, "We usually use low-grade spiritual stones, but these spiritual stones in front of you are middle-grade spiritual stones. Compared to low-grade spiritual stones, the spiritual energy in them is much more abundant. The value is also much higher than low-grade spiritual stones." I see. Di Beichun's face showed that he understood. Although there was only a difference between middle-grade and low-grade spiritual stones, the difference in spiritual energy was huge. A middle-grade spiritual stone like this would be enough for them to cultivate for a few days. Moreover, the spiritual energy in it was much purer. Ao Lingxiao, I didn't expect you to be so knowledgeable. Rin Zimei looked at Ao Lingxiao in surprise. Previously, she had only heard that Ao Lingxiao was unrestrained and had an extremely strange character. Now that they were teammates, her previous impression of him gradually weakened. Most importantly, they didn't expect that Ao Lingxiao, an outer palace disciple, would know about it. I just happened to hear about it. A.O. Ling Xiao smiled faintly and casually glossed over this matter. There are so many treasures here. Let's put them away first. Shang Guanying couldn't help but say, we don't know when Li Boyo and the others will catch up. When they come, we won't be able to make it in time. These treasures were extremely precious to cultivators. Needless to say, gold, silver, and other treasures, the most important thing was these mid-grade spirit stones, which were very helpful to them. That's right, we have to hurry, Rinzime said. Just as everyone was about to put away the treasures, Bailey Hongzhuang's voice suddenly rang out. Wait, don't touch it. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, everyone could not help but be stunned. Their faces flashed with thick astonishment. Hongzhuang, what's wrong? Shang Guanying couldn't help but ask. Chapter 4063. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang say that there was something wrong with these treasures, no one dared to touch them again. They all looked at Bailey Hongzhuang, not knowing what the problem was. Wife, what did you find? Di Beichen looked at Bailey Hongzhuang. They could not see anything wrong with these treasures with their naked eyes. He wondered what Bailey Hongzhuang had found. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes flashed with a thoughtful look. She carefully sniffed the spirit stones and said, these treasures seem to be poisoned. Hearing this, everyone could not help but widen their eyes. Poison? Bailey Hongzhuang nodded slightly. Although the smell is very faint, I can still feel it. Furthermore, I can only determine the composition of a part of this poison. I have not come into contact with the other part, but it seems to be related to the power of darkness. Then what should we do? Can we touch these things? Chu Jinfeng's eyes flashed with anxiety. It was not easy to see so many treasures, but they could not take them. This was too depressing. Mountains of gold and silver were right in front of them, but they could not take them away. Anyone who saw such a scene would be very depressing. Bailey Hongzhuang thought for a moment and said, to be on the safe side, we should not touch them. Otherwise, if we are poisoned, it would be terrible. Hongzhuang is right. Treasures are not as important as life. Di Beichen also said, since we can't take these treasures, let's not delay and continue on our way. Hearing this, although everyone was somewhat unwilling, they could only agree. Although treasures were good, they still needed to be alive to enjoy them. Before leaving, Di Beichen closed the door of the stone room again. The team behind us will definitely go in to take a look after seeing this stone room. This will buy us some time. If the people behind us do not discover the abnormality of these treasures, they will not be able to escape the fate of being poisoned. Bailey Hongzhuang shrugged. She also felt very helpless about the way the owner of this ruin did things. Could it be that this ruin was just for everyone to gain experience, and all the treasures here were just for them to look at? I don't know what the owner of this ruin was thinking to actually choose to poison these treasures. If it weren't for Hongzhuang, I'm afraid we would have all been poisoned. Xiren could not help but exclaim. Originally, after passing 2 levels, he had thought that he would finally be able to reap some rewards. He did not expect that it would be a trap. This was really depressing. Sai, the character of someone who grasps the power of darkness, is also very strange. If it were an ordinary owner of a ruin, he would probably not do something like this. A.O. Ling Xiao shrugged. It seems that cultivators who have grasped the power of darkness have very strange personalities. The inheritance they left behind is not to nurture young people, but to send them to their deaths. As A.O. Ling Xiao's voice faded, everyone's expression changed. If that was really the case, then it would be terrible. I hope it's just that the owner of this ruin likes to test everyone, and it's not what you said. Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but say. According to A.O. Ling Xiao's words, this ruin was a little scary. As everyone continued to move forward, suddenly, a huge door appeared in front of everyone. The black door had a golden totem drawn on it. At a glance, it gave people a feeling of shock. Chapter 4064. This door looks extraordinary. Could the inheritance be here? Imo Yunjue stared at the door in front of him. The surrounding decorations seemed to exude a sense of nobility. Compared to the hall they had seen before, this place in front of them was obviously more important. Everyone could not help but look at each other, secretly guessing in their hearts. If that was really the case, then it would be great. Let's go in and take a look. Di Baichen spoke out. Everyone nodded and immediately reached out to push the door open. However, after everyone pushed, they realized that the door could not be pushed open at all. Why can't this door be pushed open? Everyone looked at each other. They really did not expect to encounter such a situation. Looks like there's an 80 to 90% chance that there's a treasure behind this door. Xiren's eyes lit up. The door of the stone room was pushed open so easily before, but the thing inside was poisonous and could not be taken away. Now that this door can't be opened, the thing inside must be real. Hearing Xiren's words, everyone could not help but chuckle. If it is really as you say, then it will be great. Ever since they came here, they had been adventuring but had not gained anything. Now, they could only hope to gain something. Everyone stood in front of the door, thinking about how to enter. Thinking about it, since even they could not open this door, it could not be opened by force. There must be a trick to it. Thinking of this, everyone carefully looked around the door. Now, they could be considered to have some experience. Along the way, they have been looking for mechanisms. Presumably, this time would be no exception. I don't know what kind of mechanism it is this time. The owner of this ruin really likes to test people. Shangguan Yingying sighed. She originally thought that she was quite smart, but ever since she came here, she felt that her brain was not enough. Along the way, other than the most obvious mechanism that she saw in the hall, she really did not understand anything else that needed to be understood. Perhaps the owner of this ruin values comprehension very much. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly. She also felt that the personality of the owner of this ruin was very strange. However, there are all kinds of people. Perhaps it was because of the many obstacles that this inheritance was so amazing. Perhaps the inheritance of the power of darkness places a high value on comprehension, which is why he arranged it this way, Di Baichen said. Shangguan Yingying spread out her hands. Just from this situation, I know that this inheritance has nothing to do with me. She finally understood that if the owner of this ruin valued perception so much, then she basically had no chance at all. I only hope that there are some treasures inside. That way, I can at least gain something. Looking at Shangguan Yingying's expression, which seemed like she had already seen through everything, everyone felt a little funny. Perhaps this kind of attitude was better. Yingying, that might not be the case. Maybe the owner of the ruins appreciates your open-minded attitude, so he directly passed the inheritance to you. When Xiren smiled and joked, anything is possible. Haha, it would be great if what you said was true. When I become stronger, I will protect you. Shangguan Yingying raised her eyebrows and laughed. Chapter 4065. Facing the black and gold door in front of them, the group first looked around carefully to see if there were any traps. However, even after they searched the entire area, they found that there were no traps at all. Seeing this, the group could not help but frown. If there were no traps around, then the situation would be a little complicated. If there are no traps around, then how are we going to get in? Rinzime could not help but ask. The situation in front of them was really confusing. After Imo Yunjue carefully looked around, his gaze finally fixed on the black door. Maybe the solution lies on this door. This door? Chu Jinfeng was secretly surprised. Aside from looking a little better, there's nothing different about this door. The pattern on this door is the problem that needs to be solved. Di Baichen stared at the black door in front of him, the corners of his lips slowly curling up. Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes lit up. I didn't expect this to be a puzzle. What do you mean? Shangguan Yingying could not help but ask Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest. Until now, she had not discovered what was different about this black door. How did Di Baichen and the rest know how to solve it? Bailey Hongzhuang smiled and explained, Yingying, use your mental strength to touch this black door and you'll find out. Following Bailey Hongzhuang's words, the group tried to use their mental strength to touch the golden door. Sure enough, as soon as they touched it, a huge jigsaw puzzle appeared in front of them. The pattern on this puzzle was very similar to the pattern on the black folding door in front of them, but it was much bigger. It would not be easy to put this puzzle together. It seems that we can only enter this door after we put this puzzle together. When Xiren couldn't help but sigh. With such a large jigsaw puzzle and such a dark pattern, it really wasn't an easy task to piece it together. Moreover, looking at this number, one could tell that it would take a very long time to piece them together. Perhaps before they could piece them together, the cultivators behind them would have already caught up. "Do your best," Debachin said. For a moment, everyone sat in front of the door, tried to piece the puzzle together. In order to complete this puzzle, not only did it require sufficient time, it also required a great deal of patience. Otherwise, if he was anxious, it would be even more difficult to complete it. Just as Bailey Hongzhuang's group was trying to crack the door, the three teams of Li Buoyou, Wang Yanling, and Bai Yingtian also passed through the skeleton hall and came to the back. Among the three teams, Li Buoyou's team was the first to come out. After all, they were originally in second place and had a certain advantage. Although Wang Yanling's team was slightly slower, they didn't fall behind by much. In comparison, Bai Yingtian's team was the slowest. After all, not only were they the last to arrive, but their combat strength was also slightly weaker, so they were the last to arrive. Chapter 4066. Li Buoyou and the others continued forward until they reached the first stone chamber. Only then did they stop. Looking at the closed door of the stone chamber, Li Buoyou pushed it open with one hand. When everyone saw the current situation, their faces couldn't help but flash with a thick sense of shock. Wow! Almost everyone could not help but exclaim. So many treasures, it's really amazing. Everyone only felt an indescribable sense of luck rushing to the top of their heads. Such a scene was usually only seen in their dreams. In the next moment, everyone rushed towards the treasures, only wanted to put all the treasures into their own Chinquan bags. However, after seeing this scene, Li Buoyou could not help but be puzzled. There are so many treasures here. Why didn't Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest take them? Such treasures, as long as one was human, would definitely be tempted. Since Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest were in front of them, there was naturally no reason for them not to take them. Hearing Li Buoyou's words, everyone was a little puzzled. This was really something that they couldn't understand. Perhaps they were too anxious when they left, so they did not notice that there was a stone chamber here. Li Buoyou frowned slightly. Although this stone chamber is not particularly obvious, it shouldn't be overlooked so easily, right? The door of this stone chamber is tightly shut. Perhaps they left in too much of a hurry, so they overlooked it. Impossible. Li Buoyou shook his head. One person might have overlooked it, but how could the entire team have overlooked this place? Something must be wrong. Thinking of this, Li Buoyou could not help but move closer to the treasures to feel carefully, but he did not find anything. These were all real treasures, and there was nothing strange about them. Why would the other party neglect this place? Could it be that they feel that although these things are precious, they are all external objects? In addition, we are all chasing after them, and they want to obtain the inheritance in the ruins, so they chose to give up on these things? Another cultivator could not help but say. As everyone knew, there were always many treasures in ruins, but the most precious treasure was the inheritance of the ruins' owner. This is the only explanation that has some possibility. Li Buoyou thought for a while, but he couldn't help but sigh in his heart. If that was really the case, then the thinking of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other youngsters was truly terrifying. With so much wealth in front of them, they actually chose not to take it. This was not something an ordinary person could do. At the same time, it also proved their determination to inherit this legacy. Senior Li, that must be the case. Let's quickly put away these treasures. Otherwise, it will be too late once Wang Yanling and the others catch up. Hearing this, Li Buoyou looked at the treasures in front of him with mixed feelings. Vaguely, he felt that there must be a problem, but he couldn't figure out what the problem was. Leave some people here to store the treasures. The rest of you, follow me to chase after Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. We can't let them take the inheritance, Li Buoyou said. If the inheritance was snatched away by Wang Yanling, he might be able to accept it. However, if it was snatched away by a few juniors, he really couldn't accept it. Chapter 4067. He had to kill these fellows as soon as possible. He could not allow them to have the chance to grow. As Li Buoyou's voice fell, a portion of the cultivators immediately followed him and left. The remaining cultivators were immersed in the treasures. Bailey Hongzhuang tried her best to piece together the huge jigsaw puzzle in front of her. She had to admit that such a large number would make one feel dizzy. However, she also understood that this was the most important test for the owner of the ruins. The jigsaw puzzle in front of her not only tested her patience, but also her comprehension. It was impossible to tell what the jigsaw puzzle was just by looking at it. However, after studying it carefully, one would realize that there were some faint connections between the jigsaw puzzles. Therefore, she had to grasp these connections and connect them together before piecing them together. In the end, it all depended on one's intuition because no one knew what the jigsaw puzzle would look like in the end. When Li Buoyou and the rest arrived, they saw Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest sitting in front of the door. They looked like they were in deep meditation. Seeing this scene, Li Buoyou's eyes suddenly lit up. This was a great opportunity. It was illegal to not obtain the blessings. Everyone was in a state of meditation. If he took advantage of this opportunity to attack, the other party would not even have a chance to refute. In the next moment, Li Buoyou immediately took out his weapon and waved it at Di Beiqian without hesitation. Wang Yanling led some cultivators and quickly chased after them. When he saw that Li Buoyou was about to attack Di Beiqian, he was still some distance away. He immediately shouted, "Li Buoyou, stop!" However, after hearing Wang Yanling's words, Li Buoyou did not stop. On the contrary, he sped up. Not only him, but the other cultivators from the Crimson Moon sect also began to attack. This was the best opportunity for them. They definitely could not miss it. Wang Yanling's face turned gloomy. As fellow disciples, he did not wish for Di Beiqian and the rest to die just like that. He could not help but sigh in his heart. Di Beiqian and the rest were too careless. They actually dared to enter a state of meditation at this time. If they were not careful, they would lose their lives. The sharp sword was getting closer and closer to Di Beiqian. The smile on Li Buoyou's face gradually widened. However, just as it was about to stab Di Beiqian, Li Buoyou suddenly felt a huge force attacking him. Then his entire body flew out and fell to the ground. Li Buoyou was not the only one. The other cultivators from the Crimson Moon sect were in the same situation. The disciples of the Penglai Palace who finally arrived at the back couldn't help but smile after seeing this scene. Li Buoyou quickly stood up and looked angrily at Bailey Hongzhuang's group who were meditating. It wasn't until this moment that he understood that Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were surrounded by a layer of restrictions. No one else could attack them. No wonder they dare to sit here and meditate so boldly. Li Buoyou, you are a senior after all. How dare you sneak attack someone from the back? That is too shameless. Wang Yanling looked at Li Buoyou with a gloomy expression. He did not expect Li Buoyou to become more and more despicable in such a short time. Hearing Wang Yanling's words, Li Buoyou's expression turned ugly. Chapter 4068. They killed my brother. It's normal for me to kill them, Li Buoyou said coldly. Hearing that, Wang Yanling sneered. Do you think it's okay to pin this groundless title on the heads of our Penglai Palace disciples? Who would believe that? It's up to you to believe it or not. Li Buoyou waved his hand and did not care about Wang Yanling's thoughts. Consider them lucky this time. Anyway, they will die in my hands sooner or later. Li Buoyou, you're too arrogant. Wang Yanling looked at Li Buoyou coldly. They are the disciples of our Penglai Palace. If you dare to attack them, I will not let you off." Li Boyo snorted. "Wan Yinling, I can't be bothered to argue with you now. The most important thing is to obtain the inheritance of the relic. Let's settle our scores after this is over." "That's for the best." Wan Yinling did not back down. "It's time for us to settle our scores." The temperature suddenly dropped to freezing point. The cultivators of Crimson Moon's sect and Penglai Palace confronted each other. Both sides treated each other as enemies. However, in front of the inheritance of the relic, no one had the intention to attack. After all, the inheritance of the relic was the most important thing now. Wan Yinling looked at Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest who were sitting at the side. His eyes flashed with a faint doubt. He did not understand why Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest would choose to meditate here. At the same time, Li Boyo led the disciples of Crimson Moon's sect and started to try to open the black door. However, no matter how hard they tried, they could not open the black door in the end. Seeing this, Wan Yinling and the rest also went forward to try. The final result was the same. The black door did not budge at all. After realizing this, they stopped their previous actions. Obviously, the black door could not be opened. It must be related to the black door that Bailey Hongzhuang and the rest entered such a state. Why are Junior Brother D and the rest meditating here? Could it be that they're thinking of a way to break the black door? A cultivator could not help but guess. The other party would definitely not meditate here for no reason. It must be related to the door. That should be the case. Could it be that he did something wrong and was sealed here by the owner of this ruin? That shouldn't be the case. If they really did something wrong, they would have dissipated. There wouldn't be any power left to protect them. Wan Yinling and Li Boyo were not stupid. At this moment, they naturally understood that Di Beiqin and the others were thinking of a way to crack the black door. They immediately studied the surroundings carefully and immediately locked on to the possibility of mental strength. It must be that Bailey Hongzhuang and the others' spiritual power was connected to a certain place, so they were meditating here. Soon, Wan Yinling and the others realized that the black door was actually a huge puzzle. They had to piece the picture together. Immediately, the group of them sat beside Bailey Hongzhuang and the others and began to piece together this huge puzzle. Not long after, the disciples of the 100 Flowers Gate arrived and entered the same state. Chapter 4069. Please enter the text. Time gradually passed. Everyone sat in the same place like old monks in meditation. They did not move at all. Their divine senses had already drifted into the puzzle. During this time, many cultivators chose to give up because they could not make sense of the puzzle. They began to search around, hoping to find other treasures other than the stone chamber. However, after searching for a while, they found that this was a dead end. There was nothing else other than this hall that could not be opened. Seeing this, everyone was a little disappointed. They thought that the other treasures could only be in this hall. If they wanted to obtain the treasures, they had to complete this puzzle. Therefore, everyone had no choice but to continue the puzzle. Ever since Di Beiqin entered the puzzle world, he had been observing the pieces of the puzzle. He vaguely felt that there were some connections between them, and there was an inexplicable sense of familiarity and intimacy. Everyone had already begun to try to piece the puzzle together. However, he remained in a state of observation and did not take action. He wanted to first think of the final shape of the puzzle in his mind before piecing it together. After a long time, many pieces intertwined and stuck together in Di Beiqin's mind. When it finally turned into a black hole, Di Beiqin's gaze changed. He began to move. He quickly pieced the puzzle pieces together. It was as if he already had the original in his mind. Next, he just had to piece them together according to the order. When he finished the last piece of the puzzle, all the puzzle pieces in front of him flashed with a light and turned into a complete picture. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others only felt a special power. They saw a black light surround Di Beiqin. Then, Di Beiqin's figure disappeared from their sight. Where did Beiqin go? When Zirant's eyes couldn't help but show a trace of worry. Di Beiqin had disappeared into thin air, which really made people worried. Bailey Hongzhuang's gaze fell on Di Beichen's previous position. Her face flickered with a thoughtful look. Beichen should have already completed the pattern. Perhaps he has already entered the main hall. Following Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Li Boyo and the others couldn't help but be stunned. Their eyes flashed with shock at the same time. They didn't expect Di Beichen's comprehension to be so high. This jigsaw puzzle was so complicated that many people didn't even have a clue. Even if they had a clue, they wouldn't be able to complete it in a short time. However, Di Beichen had already completed it. Li Boyo, Wan Yinling, and Bai Ingtian couldn't help but sigh in their hearts. Before, they only thought that Bailey Hongzhuang was the most outstanding in this young team, but now it seemed that Di Beichen was absolutely not to be underestimated. Di Beichen only felt that he was wrapped in a mysterious power. When he saw everything in front of him, he was already in the main hall. Looking at the main hall in front of him, Di Beichen instinctively looked behind him. He found that Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were not here. The door behind him also made him understand that after successfully piecing together the puzzle, he had indeed entered the main hall. After understanding this point, Di Beichen looked at the main hall in front of him. Chapter 47. The black mist continued to rise, giving off a mysterious and strange feeling. Di Beichen looked at the black pool with a complicated expression. If he had seen such a pool outside, it would have been extremely strange, but it seemed very normal here. Through the black mist, Di Beichen saw that there was a coffin behind the black pool. He walked towards the coffin behind the black pool. Thinking about it, it was very likely that the coffin belonged to the owner of the ruin. Standing in front of the coffin, Di Beichen stared at the pitch-black but heavy and luxurious coffin, and a trace of respect appeared on his face. Based on what he had seen along the way, he could tell that the owner of the ruin was definitely not an ordinary person. Although this inheritance was different from the ones he had seen before, and he had only seen the treasures he had seen before, and these treasures were all poisonous, he was certain that the owner of the ruin was definitely an expert. From the words of some seniors, he understood how powerful the power of darkness was back then, and it seemed to be very evil, which was why it was surrounded by many forces. In the end, the cultivators who grasped the power of darkness disappeared from this land. Evidently, he could not understand what had happened in the past, but he believed that just like how there were black and white sides to the world, not all cultivators who grasped the power of darkness were bad people. As such, he did not reject the power of darkness. No matter what kind of power it was, as long as it was used properly, it was good. "Greetings, Senior," Di Beichen bowed to the coffin. "I hope you can forgive me for disturbing you." There was no response from the palace, and Di Beichen did not mind at all. After all, he had come to the owner's place, and even if the owner was no longer in this world, he still had to maintain the basic respect. However, just as Di Beichen bowed his head in salute, he suddenly discovered that there was a line of very small words written on the coffin. If he hadn't happened to be here to salute, he was afraid that he would have directly ignored it. However, after seeing the words written on the coffin, Di Beichen was somewhat surprised. "Those who came here kowtow 3 times. These 8 words were simple and clear, but it was very strange. Inexplicably writing to make people kowtow. The temperament of the owner of this ruin was really different. Perhaps the owner of the ruins used to have a noble status, so he was used to everyone kowtowing to him. Even though Di Beichen was a little puzzled, he still did it out of respect for the other party. The other party might be a senior from hundreds of years ago, so it wasn't really taking advantage of him. After Di Beichen kowtowed 3 times, a message suddenly flashed into his mind, causing him to be stunned. "Young man, you're very good. I like polite young people the most. You have passed my test and can now enter the black pool. As for how much you can gain, that will depend on you. Senior." "Senior?" After hearing this voice, Di Beichen tried to call out twice, but there was no response. It seems that this senior only left behind a single sentence. Little Xian nodded beside Di Beichen. "Master, the water in this black pool should be a treasure, so let's not waste time. the others might come in at any time. Chapter 4071. Please enter the text. I wonder when Hong Zhuang and the rest will be able to enter. Di Beichen could not help but look at the tightly shut door. Obviously, this door was not meant to be opened at all. Only those who had completed the puzzle were qualified to enter. He could not help Bailey Hong Zhuang and the rest, so they could only rely on their own efforts. Mistress is so smart, she will definitely be able to enter soon, Xianzi said with a smile. Hearing this, Di Beichen's eyes also showed a hint of a smile. In terms of perception, Bailey Hong Zhuang was very powerful. Since he came to the ruins, he had a very familiar feeling, so his journey was very smooth. Perhaps this ruin was fated to be with him. As Di Beichen walked into the black pool, he felt a strange power surging from the black pool and entering his body. This power was very similar to the dark power they usually felt, but it was somewhat different. The dark power he came into contact with in the past had a gloomy aura. Just feeling it made people feel uncomfortable from the bottom of their hearts. However, the power in front of him was also dark power, but it did not have the gloomy and uncomfortable feeling. On the contrary, it actually had a sense of purity. After discovering this, Di Beichen's eyes flashed with a strong sense of surprise. He did not expect there to be such a dark power. It was really amazing. Then, Di Beichen closed his eyes and began to absorb the energy in the black pool. He had already felt that the energy in the black pool was not harmful at all. On the contrary, it was extremely pure and was very helpful to improve his strength. Thinking about it, this should be the most precious thing in the ruins. After Bailey Hong Zhuang knew that Di Beichen had successfully entered the main hall, she could not help but feel a little worried. The owner of this ruin had a very strange temper. No one knew what kind of checkpoint he would set next. If everyone was together, at least they could discuss a way to deal with it. But now Di Beichen went alone. If he was in danger, it would be terrible. Therefore, Bailey Hong Zhuang also sped up the piecing speed, but she did not lose her calm because of worry, because she knew very well that in such a situation, only by calming down could she exert the fastest speed. Li Boyo, Wan Yanling, and Bai Yingtian all sped up. Di Beichen had already entered. If they were late, this inheritance might not be with them. After a while, another black light flashed, and then Bailey Hong Zhuang's figure disappeared from everyone's sight. Seeing this scene, everyone could not help but be stunned again. They did not expect Bailey Hong Zhuang to be the second to enter. Beichen and Hong Zhuang are really amazing. They are indeed husband and wife. The first one went in, and the second one followed closely behind. Shangguan Yingying's face was full of amazement, and she could not help but feel a little happy. She knew very well that this inheritance would not fall into her hands. If this inheritance was obtained by Di Beichen and Bailey Hong Zhuang, it would undoubtedly be best. Xiren also smiled and nodded. They are the inheritors of the two great abyss. Of course, they are powerful. Chapter 4072. When Bailey Hong Zhuang entered the hall, she found that there was no one in the hall. Di Beichen was not there at all. She could not help but anxiously call out, "Beichen." When Di Beichen saw that Bailey Hong Zhuang had come, his eyes flashed with surprise, and he immediately called out, "Hong Zhuang." However, after he called out, he found that Bailey Hong Zhuang did not seem to see him at all. Seeing this, Di Beichen's eyes flashed with confusion. He could not help but stand up and wanted to go out to find Bailey Hong Zhuang. However, after he stood up, he found that he could not walk out of the black pool at all. It was as if there was a force imprisoning him. Could it be that after entering the black pool, no one else can see me? Di Beichen murmured. Bailey Hong Zhuang's appearance was as if she could not see his existence. At this moment, she was still looking for him. After thinking carefully, Di Beichen also understood. It seemed that this was specially arranged by the owner of the ruins. He did not understand before, but at this moment, he understood everything. Only cultivators who respected the owner of the ruins could enter the black pool to absorb the energy. On the contrary, if they did not find the trick, they would not be able to absorb the energy in the black pool. Bailey Hongzhuang called out twice but did not get any response. She could not help but frown in confusion. Why is Beichen not here? Could it be that his speed is so fast that he has passed to the next place? Or, this is another small world. Maybe he is beside me, but I can't see him. This kind of method has always been used by the owner of the ruins. After Di Bei-chun heard Bailey Hongzhuang's muttering, his eyes couldn't help but light up. His wife was really smart. She had thought of this possibility so quickly. Bailey Hongzhuang thought for a moment and carefully looked at everything in the hall. It was obviously useless to think about other things now. The most important thing was to find out what was special about this hall. However, after walking around the hall for a while, they didn't find anything special. There was only a black pool in front of them and a coffin behind them. Bailey Hongzhuang's gaze fell on the black pool. She could feel the energy in the black pool. It must be a great treasure. Di Bei-chun saw Bailey Hongzhuang walking to the side of the black pool and could not help but feel a little worried. Speaking of which, what he did before was just a coincidence. If Bailey Hongzhuang directly tried to enter the black pool, she obviously would not succeed. Just as Bailey Hongzhuang was about to enter the black pool, her gaze once again fell on the coffin behind. I didn't expect the owner of the ruins to put this coffin together with the black pool. It seems that this black pool must be something very important to him. Bailey Hongzhuang muttered to herself. Until the end, he still had to look at the black pool. One could imagine how important it was to him. Thinking of this, Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but walk to the front of the coffin. She bowed and said, "Junior Bailey Hongzhuang greets Senior. This time Senior's ruins have appeared. Junior just happened to come here. If I have disturbed Senior, I hope Senior will forgive me." Di Bei-chun, who was in the black pool, saw Bailey Hongzhuang's actions and could not help but smile. Chapter 4073. After bowing, Bailey Hongzhuang also noticed the small line of words and immediately frowned in confusion. "Kowtow 3 times?" As Bailey Hongzhuang spoke, she could not help but look at the coffin in front of her. She was extremely astonished. Although the coffin was here, and it was not too much to do so, the request of the owner of the ruins was really out of the ordinary. "Master, isn't the personality of the owner of the ruins a little too strange?" Xiaohei looked puzzled. Although the other party was a senior, such a forceful request seemed to be taking advantage of his seniority. Yes, writing such a line of words to remind people to kowtow. This is really a little too much. Xiaobai also could not understand. It was natural to respect one's senior, but such a request was indeed a little too much. Looking at Xiaohei and Xiaobai's expressions of disbelief, Bailey Hongzhuang smiled faintly and patted the two little fellows' heads. "Although the request of the owner of the ruins is indeed a little strange, we've come to his place after all, and we're standing in front of his coffin. It's actually not too much. Senior has already passed away. As a junior, it's only right for us to pay our respects." In the next moment, Bailey Hongzhuang kowtowed 3 times. She was very impressed that the owner of the ruins could leave such a ruin in this training ground. After kowtowing, Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes suddenly changed, and a strong sense of amazement flashed in her eyes. I didn't expect that entering the black pool would require such a test. For a moment, Bailey Hongzhuang could not help but feel a little lucky. She only thought that she should at least show some respect since she had come to the owner of the ruins. She did not expect that the key point was here, which was really surprising. "Thank you, Senior." Bailey Hongzhuang bowed again, then turned and walked towards the black pool. After she walked into the black pool, Di Bei-chun's figure appeared in front of her. "Bei-chun." Her light and pleasant voice was filled with surprise. "I didn't expect you to be here." Di Bei-chun revealed a joyful smile. "Yes, my wife." "Then why didn't you call me before?" Bailey Hongzhuang was puzzled. Di Bei-chun smiled faintly. "I try to call out to you, but there's actually a restriction in this black pool. My voice can't pass through it all, so I see. Bailey Hongzhuang immediately understood. This is my master's test. If you can remind me, then this test will be meaningless. Not bad. Di Baichen nodded. I didn't expect it to be such a test. Fortunately, we succeeded in entering the black pool. This test is actually very simple, but I'm afraid there aren't many cultivators who can discover this point and complete it. Her ink-black phoenix eyes flickered with the light of contemplation. This was actually not a test at all. It was just a test of the cultivator's manners. If he had respect for the owner of the ruins, there would naturally be no problem. On the contrary, if he did not have such thoughts, he would not gain anything even if he turned the entire hall upside down. Chapter 4074. Bailey Hongzhuang carefully sensed the energy in the black pool. Although the pool water was black and gave off a very gloomy feeling, the energy that came into contact with it was extremely pure. It was an extremely rare energy. This kind of energy could be directly absorbed by cultivators. There was almost no need for them to circulate their techniques to refine it. It was truly shocking. Not only that, although the black pool did not seem very large, the energy it contained was extremely shocking. If a cultivator could absorb all the energy in the black pool, it would be extremely terrifying. I never thought that the energy in the black pool would be so pure. It seems that we have to hurry. Bailey Hongzhuang's lips curled into a smile. This kind of opportunity was hard to come by. Although it would take a lot of time to put the puzzle together, it would probably be able to stop a certain number of cultivators from entering. However, it would only be a small part of it. With Wan Yinling and the other's intelligence, they would definitely be able to enter. Hence, the more energy they could absorb, the more they would be able to improve. This was undoubtedly extremely good. Di Baichen nodded. This situation is really suitable for Xiren and the others. It would be great if they could enter earlier. Now that when Xiren and the others were clearly weaker than them, if they could seize this opportunity to improve themselves, they would be able to ascend to the upper realm earlier. That's right. Bailey Hongzhuang's pretty face was filled with emotion. I really hope that their cultivations can quickly improve. Although Shangguan Ying and Xiren had always appeared extremely calm, she knew very well that their strengths were originally about the same. Ever since they had returned from the demonic tower, there had been such a huge gap between their strengths. She believed that when Xiren and the others must have felt a certain gap in their strengths. I believe that they should still be able to enter. Di Baichen's extraordinarily handsome face was filled with a faint smile. His eyes shone with confidence. Although Shangguan Ying was more impatient, based on his understanding of her over the years, he believed that Shangguan Ying and the others would be extremely serious about this matter. With their level of comprehension, as long as they were willing to think about it carefully, they would definitely be able to piece the puzzle together. Then, Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Baichen didn't say anything else. Instead, they focused on absorbing the rich and pure energy. Not only that, but Little Xian, Xiao He, Xiao Bai, and White Lion also entered the black pool. The energy was extremely beneficial to their strength. Shangguan Ying and the others stayed outside. After seeing Bailey Hongzhuang disappear, everyone calmed down. At the very least, this proved that not only one cultivator could enter. As long as they worked hard and successfully pieced the puzzle together, they would have the opportunity to receive the inheritance. Shangguan Ying was originally a little impetuous, but after Di Baichen and Li Wuyo disappeared, she couldn't help but calm down. They were a team, and no matter what, they didn't want to be separated. At the same time, she didn't want the gap between her and Bailey Hongzhuang to widen. Mo Yunjue's eyes were still closed. Although he could sense everything that was happening around him, he didn't seem to be affected at all. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.